The final part, B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully the final part, we'll have to go through it of the series of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And last time we ended off with the three plagues, the first three plagues. So we did blood, dam, tzvaldea, which was frogs, and kanim, which was lice. That's where we finished. We're going to start off today with the fourth one, which is going to be wild animals. So the order that this is going to be is generally, and this way, so we don't have to go through the same, every single plague. We'll have to go through it. Moshe is going to come. He's going to warn him. Paro is going to say, very nice, thank you for the warning. Then Moshe is going to bring, after 3 weeks, so every warning is 3 weeks, followed by a 1 week of plague, all except for the plague of darkness, which is only lasts for 6 days, not for 1 week. We'll discuss it when we get there, B'ezrat Hashem. After the plague, when the plague's about to end, Paro is always going to be like, all right, I give up, I'm going to let the Jews go. And then Moshe comes the next day, and Paro says, I haven't changed my mind. And then the cycle is going to begin again with the next warning. So we finish off with the plague of lice. And now Paro says, I'm not letting the Jews go. So Moshe comes in, and he tells him that there is going to be the next plague, the plague of wild animals. Now, the plague of wild animals, one of the reasons of this plague is the Paro always, the first two plagues were blood and frogs, and the next one was lice. So Paro always said, the only reason why the area of Paro, which was centered near the Nile, got affected by this, and not Goshen, which is where the Jews lived, which is outside the Nile, which is further away, was because all these plagues originated in the Nile with the water. Water is blood, and then frogs also came out of the water. So God this time, he made the plague of wild animals that they actually went through when they traveled. So there was a calling of all the wild animals. They actually went through Goshen. They actually went through the Jewish thing, not harming anybody. Went straight to the center of Egypt, and that's why there's no more sort of excuses of saying, oh no, it has nothing to do with the Jews, because you see a lot throughout the 10 plagues. Paro always tries to justify that it's not God. The Egyptians, magicians, also always try to say that, no, it has nothing to do with God, it has to do with nature, and we'll soon see how each one actually comes to pass. Okay, so now the way that Moshe is going to go and warn Paro is that he's going to go to him in the river when he's doing his bodily function. So we said in the last class that he pretended to be a god, and gods don't need to go to the bathroom, but he did need to go to the bathroom because he wasn't a god. So he would go in the Nile. And the issue is that the last time Moshe came to him in the Nile, and he sort of surprised him. He was doing his business in the Nile. Moshe sort of snuck up to him, tapped him on the shoulder. He's like, oh, what's going on? While he's in the middle of his business, Moshe's like talking to him and warning him. So now Paro realizes, he says, listen, what? All business. So he goes and he says, this time I'm going to outsmart Moshe. So he switched around his whole routine. He figured somehow that he found out his routine, so he switched out. Very early he goes in a different location. So you can't hide from God. So Moshe goes. God tells Moshe exactly where to go, exactly where time is. So Paro is over there. He's doing his business again, and then Moshe sneaks up upon him again, and he tells him, about this plague, and he sees what he's doing. So he goes to Paro again. He says, "Listen, I thought you were a God. What you doing?" And Paro says, "What's your business? What I'm doing?" He's like, "No, I'm just saying. You told me you're God, and you told everybody else you're God." He says, "But gods don't need to go to the bathroom." So then Paro gives the same answer he gave last time. He says, listen, whatever I told the Egyptians between me and my Egyptians, they're fools or idiots. I can tell them whatever they want. They believe anything. So Moshe goes to Paro and says, listen, he says, you have to let the Jews go, and if you don't let the Jews go, then this is going to happen. He starts describing him the plague of wild animals. Now, before we actually we're going to go into what's the measure for measure, why specifically did they deserve wild animals. So number one is that the Egyptians used to go and they used to make the Jews capture wild animals for sporting events, also for their idol rituals, and for their sacrifices that they would need to do. So a lot of Jews were murdered during these conquests. Additionally, not if they weren't murdered, they were by these wild animals, they were severely injured. Additionally, what we have over here is it wasn't just one wild animal. It wasn't just like a group of tigers and bears and lions that came to go and to destroy Egypt. It was all ranges of animals. We'll soon see even not so wild animals came in, and usually they fight against each other. But here they came a united front all together. They put aside their differences, and they all went and focused on one enemy, and that's the Egyptian nation. Now, one of the reasons that they all united in sort of unity is that the Egyptian children were all not from the same. They were not united from the same parents. The Egyptian society we know is very immoral, and so they would have a few kids over here from this person, a few kids. Who really knows? knows? Who's counting? So everybody. So because they were so mixed with their marital life, therefore also the animals also came in sort of a mixed fashion, and they all united together. Another reason is that the Egyptians used to force the Jews to nurse their babies, like free daycare. But it wasn't like easy. They put tons and tons of babies to like one Jewish person and let them go and deal with it. So now these wild animals are going to go and they're going to go kill and they're going to devour these children that these Egyptian parents made them watch. Additionally, the Egyptian also they all band together. For one, their target was the Jewish nation. Now all the animals are going to band together for their one target, the Egyptian nation. And lastly, they used to also instill a lot of fear on the Jews. They used to instill a lot of fear. Because they instilled a lot of fear, they were punished with fearsome animals. One more reason, actually. The Jews used to always need to go and tend to the Egyptian flocks. But the problem is that because they were tending to the Egyptian flocks, they would be neglecting their own flocks. And due to that, wild animals will come and eat their own flocks. So sort of as a payback that wild animals now, instead of going and it's going to be destroying their animals, it's going to actually destroy the people. Okay, so Moshe goes and the warning is in effect. And the next day, there's hordes and hordes of wild animals. Now, these are not, just any regular wild animals. But before we even go over there, when Moshe gives over Paro this warning, Paro says, "Okay, very nice. You finished," because he was a little, doing his business, like we said before. And Paro says, "Are you finished with the warning?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, so be gone now." Basically, he wanted to finish what he's doing. So he kept on trying to go to the bathroom, and it wasn't so successful. So much so that his intestines ruptured and they came out. And just when then God sent a whole flock of rats come and they started biting their sharp teeth in his intestines that protruded.
Wait,
and
his intestines?
It was outside now. It was inside before. Now it came out. Now the rats are able to. Okay. We could paint the picture. So they go and they start biting his intestines, and he's screaming from pain. Meanwhile, all the Egyptian people, it's way early in the morning. Everyone's sleeping. We know that Paro made a decree that no one's allowed to go out of the house because that's when he has to go to the river to do his business. They all start screaming. Everyone comes rushing out. They see Paro crawling over in pain, rats basically eating up his situation, and they're all like, they're all saying, "Oh, where's our God? This is our God. That this is how he's doing." So he goes, and with the anger and the frustration that he got for that, he made his heart really strong. He says, "I'm not sending any of the Jews out." And the attack goes, and the next day the wild beast came in. Now it was wild beast that it wasn't only that there was completely different species, but it was from completely different habitats. So you had the polar bears from the cold, then you have the African lions from the hot, and they all came together. And so much so, it was usually animals do not feel comfortable to attack unless they're in their home grounds. So God made it the whole Egyptian, for this plague turned into whatever that particular animal was. So if it was a lion, it turned into like a jungle or a desert sort of thing. Polar bear turned into ice. So they all felt very comfortable wherever they were. And they had, you're talking about lions, bears, panthers, wolves, pigs, donkeys, kangaroos, the Australian ones. They all just came. They all came. And then you had, not only that, you also had the birds. You had the ostriches, you had even you had fleas and flies, mosquitoes. There was so much birds that you couldn't see the sun. It was like, you're talking about like an army of all the animals. You're talking about, safari, basically a live safari, but no one's safe. And to make matters worse, they invited two of their old friends, the frogs and the lice, came back for this one as well. And you know how you have like, now they're terrified from these two things. You're like traumatized from the frogs and the lice, but no, they just came back with a passion. Now, not only did the wild animals come, but also tame animals came. Regular, calm animals that are not usually so aggressive towards humans or towards other animals, but God made them aggressive. So I think that's like one of the scariest things. You're talking about something like, oh look, it's a cute thing, and then it's like, it's like something like, like a cute little parrot, just like, nonstop. So it came in all sorts of terror.
Sheep and cows?
Everything came. So. And not only that, they came in. You think of it as like like fangs. It like grew on them. They grew venom. These like ferocious animals grew venom. So and the poison. So now what the Egyptians started doing, they saw these things, so they started barricading themselves in their homes. They started blocking themselves in the homes, and the animals couldn't get into the home, so they started tunneling under. So you had the snakes that were going under, and you had all these animals that were dugling under to try to like get to, you're sitting over there and you're hearing the wolf is trying to come in over there. He's huffing and puffing. What? They were programmed to attack all the Egyptians. Oh no, as soon as only the Egyptians. So they were in their houses. They were boarded up. So God sent these sea monsters. The sea monsters will be known as otherwise as like giant squids or octopuses that were good on land. You're talking about with each arm over 15 feet long. And they would go and they would break through. They would go on the roofs. They would rip off the roofs, and then the animals would jump in. They would go and barricade and break down the barricades from inside, and then the animals would come in.
How would a sea monster live on land?
How would, that's a question? I can find many questions here. It's all miracles. These are all miracles nonstop. These are you'll see everything is out of the ordinary, because one of the proofs, one of the reasons that God did this is that to show the world and to show the Jewish nation, to show the Egyptian nation that God rules over everything. So everything, nature does not come into play in anything over here. But with all that being said, God does everything in a way that you could excuse it through nature, and we'll soon see. So, while these squids and these octopuses are making the doorways open, so now the Egyptians are in their house and they're getting attacked from the front. Meanwhile, from under the ground, the snakes and the lizards and all those other reptiles were able to break in. So they were getting attacked from all angles. So the Egyptians were nervous now. They were scared. So they told the Jews, "Come protect us." So if they walked in the street, they walked with like a Jew, like holding hands, right? So maybe the Jew will protect us. But the animals, they were programmed so well that they knew who was a Jew and who was not a Jew. So they went and they destroyed the Egyptian and they kept the Jew. They didn't even bother the Jew. The Jew were walking through literally like it was a safari without any problems. When it came nighttime, because this plague was there for 7 days. So when it came nighttime, the regular animals went to sleep, and then the night animals came out, and then they came over there. So there was no resting. Now when the Jews had to carry daycare for all their Egyptian children, so they had the children with them at that point in time. But the animals came, and literally one animal per child. They took him and they just ran away. So when the Jew came back to the Egyptian and they didn't have any of their kids, they're like, "Where's the kids?" So the Jews literally like shrugged it off and be like, "Well, that one was a lion. I think a giraffe got that one." Literally go one by one. So even furthermore, there were so many animals in there that the animals, when they moved their bowels, they destroyed the soil of Egypt. Egypt was very rich soil, was a very beautiful land. Literally destroyed also the soil as well. Paro realized that this is a situation going on over here, and he can't, go on like this. So he starts deciding, okay, we gotta deal with this head on. There's no more, Moshe is just some fake guy. There's obviously something over here that, we can't go out. So he decided he needs to call Moshe. The problem is that he couldn't get out of his palace. Nobody could get out of the palace, because the second you go out, if they were able to barricade, some of them, the way that they got saved is that they barricade themselves in these like towers and these things that the animals still weren't able to get to them. So Paro was scared. He couldn't go out. So he started screaming from his palace, "Moshe, Moshe!" He started screaming, "Moshe and Aaron!" But he couldn't. It actually was a miracle that it went through everywhere. But what happened was afterwards is that people, other Egyptians heard him screaming, so they also started screaming, "Moshe, Moshe and Aaron," until it finally reached to where Moshe and Aaron was, and they basically called him to go into to Paro that way. So Moshe goes over to Paro, and Paro says, "Listen, I see that there is indeed a God." So Moshe says, "So does this mean that you're prepared to let the Jewish nation go?" He says, let's talk about it. We're two businessmen over here. Let's negotiate. So he says, "Listen, I thought about it. I said, you wanted to go and sacrifice to your God. You tell me your God is everywhere. So why do you need to go to 3? Because Moshe was telling him what we need for the Jewish people to go, just a recap from last week, is that we need a 3-day trip to the desert to go and sacrifice to God. So Paro says, "Listen," he says, "if God is everywhere, why do you need to go to the desert? I give you full permission to go and sacrifice in Egypt." I'm not a nice guy. Look at me. I'm giving you full permission. So he says, "No need for you to travel. You can do it right over here." So Moshe answers back to him. He says, "Listen, while it's a nice gesture, it's not going to happen. We need to sacrifice animals, and you Egyptians worship animals. It's not going to go well." Paro says, "Don't worry about it." He says, "I give you full permission." So Moshe says, "With all due respect, with your full permission, if I'm getting their animals of these Egyptians, they don't care about you. They're going to attack straight on." And Paro knew that he was right. So Paro says, "Okay." So let's go and negotiate a little further. He says, "All right." He says, "Why do you need to go on a 3-day journey? 1 day is enough. Let's go on 1 day, and that'll be enough." But what he said, Paro was very deceitful. He says, why don't you go for one day? Which means he wasn't intending to actually, it was a play in words that he was using. He wasn't intending to allow all his, the Jewish nation go. He says, you, Moshe and Aaron, you go for one day. I'll give you permission. Go ahead. So Moshe caught on this. He saw what Paro was doing, but he decided not to act upon it. So he says, fine, I'll pray to God. I'll pray to God that the animals will go away. And Moshe prayed to God. All the animals, all the wild beasts after the prayer, just booked Egypt. Everyone left. Not a single one remained. They made sure that not a single one remained, because one of the things that go with the plagues is that the Egyptians would never benefit from anything from the plague. So if animals would have been left over, they could have used it for their hides. Some animals are very expensive or very good meat, whatever it was. None of the animals left. Everything went outside of Egypt. So Paro, the same deceitful Paro, he of course backs out on his word the second that everything is calm. Usually this is how the wicked are. They start praying to God, they're going to change their life when everything bad happens. The second that the good thing happens, be like, don't worry about it, I'm okay. No need for your help, I'm okay. And they go right back to the regular ways. So he refuses to let the Jews out. Moshe, right back on the cycle. There's the fifth, this is where he's going to get the fifth plague, which is the death of all the cattle, death of all the flocks that were in there. It was like an epidemic. So Moshe goes and he warns Paro about this plague. Now the ram over there was one of the Egyptians actually worshipped these animals. So you think about it, okay, all the animals died, not so bad. But if it's your gods that are dying, it makes puts a little bit different spin on it. So. And you're talking about everything. There's not going to be cows for milk and goats, and everything is going to go. And the miracle that is going to be is that usually these types of epidemics they travel by air, so they kill all these animals, all these things. But any Jewish animal owned, nothing's going to be touched to it. It's going to remain completely healthy, even if they were grazing in the same grass. Nothing's going to happen to the Jewish animals, only to the Egyptian animals. What is the measure for this? The Egyptians used to give these flocks, these sheep, and all the animals that the Jews would have to tend to, and they would send them really far out of Egypt, so they have to be separate. Well, it could be still in Egypt, but far out from their families in Goshen, so that they would be separated from their wives, so they wouldn't be able to have any kids. So because of these animals, the Jews couldn't be with their family. So because of that, these animals are going to go and they're going to die. And also, like we said before, is the Jews didn't have time to tend to their own animals. So now, since they were lacking in tending to their own animals of the Egyptians are going to die as well. And additionally, the Egyptians used to go and they used to, instead of, you have a plow. So you put an ox in a plow, some strong animal. They let their oxen rest, and they put the Jews in the plows. They harnessed the Jews like animals, and they would whip them, and the Jews had to go and plow the fields. So because of that, they went and all these animals were going to die. Now, it is important to realize that not every single animal that would die, there was about 10% of the animals in Egypt that remained. And we're going to soon see why there's going to be a reason for them to remain. So this was a very instant plague. It wasn't like it took a week. It was instantly. In one moment, all of them died. All the animals just plopped down and died. Now, this was also dangerous to the people that were sitting on these animals. So, if you had a person that was riding an animal, if they fell over where they died, they either got injured, they could have gotten killed, they could have, who knows what they would have gotten, but it did harm the people as well. But Paro, in his own, even though in Paro he lost all his animals, he wasn't particularly nervous about this. The Jews had all the animals. He would be able to buy animals, and the plague was over. So it wasn't like, he didn't feel pressure to send the Jews out. He's like, there's no, it's done. There's nothing that you could, it's not like the epidemic went slowly, and then like 5% of the animals died. In one instant, everything died. So Paro hardened his heart and says, listen, all right, it's done, what can you do? And move on. He didn't feel it's such a big deal, and he would refuse to let the Jews out. The next plague, the sixth plague, was the plague of boils. This one came without any warning. We said, in the beginning of last class, the way that the plagues worked, it was warning, warning, no warning. Warning, warning, no warning. That was the way that...
Cattle, not wild animals.
5 was cattle, 4 was wild animals. So, the plague of boils the way that it started, that was going to start was that it's Moshe and Aaron each took like 2 handfuls of this ash, and Moshe would put his handful on one hand, which is already a miracle. Aaron will put his handful on Moshe's hand as well. So you had here four handfuls of ash in one hand, and he would take this up and he would throw it up in the air. And this thing, one of the miracles is that this thing would go, the ash usually, it doesn't go a few feet, it just gets blown with the wind. The miracle was it went straight to the sky. It was like a shooting beam to the sky, and then it spread out throughout the entire Egypt. You're talking about a tremendous amount, 1,100 miles, all around. And whenever the ash came in contact with any skin of the Egyptians, it turned into boils. Now, what is the measure for this particular makah, for this plague? So the Jews used to be forced to either cool off the boiling hot baths of the Egyptians or make them okay. So you guys are getting where I'm going, good. And even furthermore, they used to work the Jews so hard that their skin would tear and they would turn with boils and cuts and bruises, and they would be so overloaded with work that they wouldn't even been able to attend to those bruises. The Egyptians also, they made the Jews work so hard that the blood oozed out of them, from all these wounds, and even furthermore, they spilled blood. So to now, these and blisters are going to eventually also spill blood. And lastly, they also used to work a lot under the sun. Egypt is very hot, so you're talking about serious sunburn that would blister up, and you wouldn't have rest if if you're not able to work that day. You still have to work. So all these things that they cause the Jews to have boils and skin issues, now the Egyptians are going to have their skin issues. So the Makkah begins, and one of the first things that this Makkah hit, this plague hit, was the Egyptians' magicians. That's the one who hit them the first. But besides, one of the reasons is that they always told Paro, don't send them. There's reasons for it. They always gave them the excuses. So now God made it so bad that they weren't even able to go and present themselves in front of Paro, because they got it so bad that they looked deformed. The blisters was erupting, and the skin was peeling off. They didn't even look like their own self. So they were so embarrassed to even go out. There was, all in all, there was 24 different types of boils that were in this plague. That the purpose of that was that some boils need a certain ointment, or you need cold water. Other blisters, you need hot water to heal it. So every single blister needed a different type of thing. So if you tried to heal one thing, the other thing would be aggravated. So the Egyptians could never actually heal it, because there were so many different types of boils in there that they could never do anything. Furthermore, every little time that it was touched, it was excruciating pain. And what God did was that these boils, ended up making cavities, holes in their skin, and infections started brewing, and it started oozing pus and blood and all this nastiness. So the boils actually always remained with Paro and the Egyptians. They never actually fully healed from this.
None of the Egyptians thought maybe they should convert to Judaism.
They did. Not yet, but soon we'll see. Yeah. Spoiler alert. We'll see soon. So so Paro, up until this point, Paro had the ability to go and repent by his own means and send the Jews out. After already over here, it was so bad over here, the boils, that he would have wanted to send the Jews out. But it was so bad that at this point in time, God already, told him that's it. He's hardening his heart, that even if he wants to go, God's going to make sure that the Jews stay. So he's going to get the full wrath of all the punishment that there was. So he goes and he refused to go and to let the Jews out. Again, the same idea. You're holding back a question. Go ahead.
Was Paro affected at all?
Yes, he was.
Oh, he was. Okay, just making sure. Okay.
So at this point in time, so we just finished the sixth plague, and after the first 5 plagues, we said Paro had the ability to change on his own will. Now the 6th plague and on, God hardened his heart. So Paro at this point in time, he convinced that God exists. He's seeing these one after another. You got to be really stubborn to think that he didn't exist, but he was.
Or had ability
to do repentance and send out the Jews by himself. If he wanted to send out the Jews, he could have. But now God made it that he wouldn't be able to. So, and by the way, we spoke about this a little bit before, but the idea behind this is a very common one. The Rambam and Maimonides speak about it in Hilchot Tshuva, that if you there are certain sins that people do that God prevents you from doing Tshuva. Okay, but in any case, so even though Paro realized that now God exists and he's there, he didn't really fully believe that he's the sole power. He's like, okay, he's a very powerful God. Doesn't mean that all other gods are nullified. So this point that Moshe is now, we're up to Moshe went and warned Paro for this one. The next one is the where it rained fire, it hailed like fire and ice in the same ball, of which we'll soon explain it. So the two weapons that God usually uses for punishing the wicked is either fire or water. You look at fire in Sodom, for example, or water in the Great Flood. So over here, God put both of these together. They united forces together. And besides just these giant balls of ice with burning fire inside them, it also accompanied with thunder, lightning. These were literally, and these things were not small little, ice. It wasn't like small little cute. When it hails now, everyone takes out their videos. Oh, look at that! You see these? I saw one that came out the size of a golf ball. You're talking about balls of ice that were greater than 1.5 feet, more than 6 tefachim wide. You're talking about a serious ball of ice in fire. It's a bomb. It's an explosion. It lands on the floor and it explodes. This thing was, they destroyed everything. It uprooted trees. It pulverized the wood over there. It destroyed everything. It literally bombs raining from heaven. Now, what is the measure for this makkah? Number one is that the Jews were forced to plow and tend to all these things as animals, all these fruits and vegetables and trees. So God went and God destroyed everything. So the Egyptians are not going to be able to benefit from it. Furthermore, the Egyptians would not allow, it was very hot it's always hot in Egypt, it's a lot of sun. The Jews did not allow, the Egyptians did not allow the Jews to go and benefit from the shade of the trees. So he says, okay, you're not going to let them, you're not going to have any shade. Destroyed, all these hails went and destroyed the trees. The Egyptians used to beat the Jews with stones and also with like this vulgar language. They would curse at them and scream at them. So to now they were hurled with stones from heaven, and the loud, deafening noises of the thunder and the lightning and the booming, crashing sounded also went and scared the Egyptian. So at this point, he gets warned. This is what Paro gets warned. And meanwhile, Bilam, the wicked man, he is still over there by the side of Paro, and he's still convincing. He's convincing Paro. He says, listen, don't let them out. He says, we stayed up strong until now. Let's go. Let's push this forward. So Moshe goes and says, and he warns them. He says they still had, we said from the last few plagues, they still had some animals that were alive. They still have some livestock. Besides the fact that they bought livestock from the Jews, they went and they actually bought livestock from the Jews. So Moshe goes and tells them, he says, he warned them. You want the livestock to live, you got to keep them hidden. You got to bring them inside, because if you bring them out, they're going to get killed by all this hail. So. While this was, while Moshe was telling this to Paro, he was telling this in front of all the, it wasn't in the private little, pool that he had where he did his business. He actually told it in front of his palace and all his advisors. So Moshe saw that they were starting to get nervous. They were starting to speak to each other. There was some murmuring going around over here. So Moshe goes and he leaves. And meanwhile, there's a conversation that's going on, and they start saying, "Listen, for example, Eob said, listen, I think we should bring in our livestock. Don't be, this guy is 6 for 6." And everything that he said came true. So we've got to be a fool to leave it out. Bilam says, no. He says, we're not. We're sticking to our grounds. I'm leaving my livestock out. Everything's going to be out. And many people went and they listened to Bilam and they kept it out. Like fools. Like, how many times do you have to learn your lesson? Like 6 for 6 of not like, good lucky guesses. It's going to rain tomorrow, 6 for 6. You're talking about crazy supernatural ideas, and they still went against their own, common sense, which is a miracle in itself. And they went and you see how they kept on, falling more and more. So obviously they didn't listen. Paro didn't send out the Jews, and the next day, Moshe, Hashem lifted Moshe up to the heavens. He spread out his hands, and the plague began. And this plague began. First of all, it started raining, not big. It started raining regular small droplets. But as it got into the atmosphere, it expanded, and fire created inside of it. And the speed that it kept on, coming in. So much so that it was some of them were fire inside and ice on the outside. Some of them was ice inside and fire on the outside. So the ones with the fire on the outside actually streaked of a flashing, like I don't know how do you explain this? Like exactly, like stars falling from heaven. So when these things burst open, and there was flames. It actually went up like to you're talking about like height of like 18 inches off the ground of like flames just like bursting. That now a lot of the Egyptians heard about this. They knew the warning, so they went and they hid themselves in bunkers and all these things. But they were, even though they were free, they didn't get hurt if they were inside, and they kept themselves locked up in a safe place in whatever it was that they were. Like a picture of miklat, right? They went into like in Israel, there's like these bomb shelters. So they made themselves bomb shelters. They kept safe over there, but they still heard the noises and the ground was shaking. Sometimes it's even scarier when you don't see anything and you keep on hearing like. It's like ridiculous noises that are going there. The whole ground is shaking, so that itself caused them to go crazy. So even though they most of them did bring in their animals, some of them did not bring in their animals, and they saw that there was so much hail that was falling and ice that was falling from heaven that it barricaded the animals. That even while it was falling, they tried to okay, let's try to bring in the animals, but it barricaded themselves in the field, and they couldn't bring in the animals. So these Egyptians went and said, listen, if we're going to lose these animals anyways, let's at least get their meat. So they quickly run out, they kill these animals, and they take the meat, they put it on their backs, and they start running back into shelter. God goes and sends these birds swooping through these falling hails. They see these meat over here. They grab the meat off them and they fly off. So they couldn't even benefit from their own meat that they had. These fires were actually fires of the fires of hell. They weren't just your simple run-of-the-mill fires. And so you had people that either burned to death, you had people that froze to death from the ice, and then you had people that got pulverized from the pain of the impact of these hail. Now people tried to go and they tried to run to Goshen because they knew Goshen is the safe haven. That's no, there's nothing falling out over there. And the coolest thing was, and I think this is one of the coolest parts, is that how like you have now these missiles that have GPS navigation. So you see them, you to lock out a target, even though the target tries to move, it just follows the target. So these hail had GPS navigation. These Egyptians tried to run to Goshen. It was like going down, and then it's like turns up and it starts going up and down, zigzagging until it hits them right on target, and target acquired. So the hailstones they found them in Goshen and they killed them over there. So some of the Egyptians, when they went, they figured they knew that this was coming, so they knew what they wanted to do is they went into partnership with other Jews, and they said, listen, I have a field, buy my field, half and half. This way they figured that, this way they'll be able to save their land. But God made a miracle that whatever land they made up, that it was the Egyptian versus the Jews, that part was completely destroyed. The Jews part stayed completely safe. So, swallowing his pride, Paro goes to Moshe and he says, listen, I had enough. He says the noise in itself is driving me crazy. He says, I'll let the people leave. I'll let the Jewish people leave. Let them go. Please, whatever you do, stop the hail. Stop it right now. So Moshe says, listen, he says, we went through this charade already before. You told me, we didn't go through that. How do I know I'm going to trust you? So Paul says, listen, I'm a changed man. You know how swindlers tell you, like, listen, I have a good business deal for you. I'm a changed man. He says, yeah, I'm a changed man. Why bring up old stuff? Trust me, this time, I'm going to set you out free. I'm going to let you go. So Moshe goes and he says, listen, I can't pray over here. I'm going to have to go out of the city as I usually do to pray because all you have full of idols and I can't pray full of idols. So Paul is telling him, he says, why are you telling me this now? You never told this to me before. He says, because every time before, the plague was stopped the day after you came to me. But now that you wanted to stop right away immediately, that you're going to send the Jews out, I have to tell you the slight delay is going to be until I go out. And this is why you know that there's going to be a delay. So he's like, all right, whatever the delay is, just go. Yalla, no, Zeus, don't you want your precious Jews to leave? He says, get out of here so we can get rid of this hail. So Moshe goes, prays to God, and the hail ceases, and everything comes back to normal. Now, the hail destroyed everything. It destroyed everything, but it left a few things still around for the next bonus plague of the locust to come in. It left the plague it left the wheats, and it left the spelt, the things that were unformed yet, so they were flexible. It didn't destroy all of those, but everything else was destroyed. So at this point now, the hail stopped. Everything comes back to normal. So Moshe goes over to Paro, says, so deal still stands, we're going? Paro says, listen, our agreement is null and void. So he says, what are you talking about, null and void? He says, you had told me to stop it, I stopped it. He says, yeah, I told you to stop it, but I wanted the rain. He says, we need rain in Egypt. We don't get much rain over here. He says, you stopped everything. Null and void. He found a loophole, he thinks for himself, and he says, no, I'm not going to, he says, that's it. I'm not sending you out. Fine. Moshe comes in, and now on day in, day out, the same story, 3 weeks of warning, the next plague is going to come. And the next plague was going to be the plague of locust. You always think about it. When I was learning this, when I was younger, locust, I'm like, you just destroyed them with missiles from heaven. with literally like supernatural crazy things. There were snakes that were crawling from under their house into their house. And what's so scary about locusts? You know what? Yeah, all right. So, you get a bunch of little insects flying around.
Like life size, like as big as people.
No, I never read that. Would have been really cool though. So, but don't worry, God kept it really cool still. So, the Moshe goes over to Paro and he warns him about this plague locust, and he says, "Listen, don't think that all your little charades of pretending to let us go and then not letting us go didn't go unnoticed." He says it's going to come back to hurt you. And so they go, and Moshe goes, and the begins the plague of the locust. And he tells him, he says, the locust, he says, he warns, the way he warns Paul is not just telling him it's locust, he gives him a little bit of knowledge about it. He says, it's going to be so much locust over here, it's going to look like an attacking army that's going to be flying in. He says there's going to be so many species over here that it's going to be dark in Egypt. While they're here, you're not going to be able to see the sun. That's how much locust it's going to be. It's going to be completely nighttime. Yeah. He says, furthermore, they're going to go and they're going to damage all the roots. Even though the hails, they destroyed everything, but there was still something that you could for the next season would be able to plant. He says these locusts are going to destroy all the roots, and furthermore, there are going to be so many of them on top of another. Usually, a person gets satisfied when he's able to see his food. He's able to see his food. He knows, he ate enough. He's going to stop. When someone can't see his food, they just keep on eating. He says these locusts they're going to be so much on top of another. They're not going to be able to see anything. They just keep on eating and eating and eating and eating and eating and nonstop. There's not going to be anything left in Egypt. And he goes to Paro goes to Moshe goes to Paro. This is your last warning. It's now or nothing. Are you going to let the Jews out? Paro says, of course, not going to happen. And the next day, the plague begins. But before Moshe was able to actually leave over here and the plague begin, there was a meeting with all the advisors. There was a meeting of all the advisors, and they came over to Paul and they said, listen. He says, what are you waiting for over here? All right, what's with the stubbornness? He says, we got 7 plagues over here. They destroyed. Egypt was once a beautiful land. Look at it now. It's destroyed. It's at wreck. Just let them go already. Yalla khalas. No, let them go. Let them go. So he says, what are you going to wait for till we're all dead? Let's get rid of these Jews once and for all. So, now Paul says, what? Okay, fine. He calls Moshe and Aaron back and he says, listen. He says, I have a change of heart, And the locusts, this is where we actually got him. He says, all right. And he starts the negotiation process again. He says, all right, you can go sacrifice to your God, by all means. Who is going to be going and who's going to be sacrificing? Says Paro. So Moshe tells him it's going to be the men, women, children, the elders, everybody's going, and we're going to take our animals also. So Paro says, listen, I don't see, why do you need all of them to go? Women, children, they're not involved in the sacrifices. They don't sacrifice anything. Just take a few guys, a few men, and go and sacrifice. So Moshe goes and replies like, no. He says, our festivals are for everybody, not just for, a few people. So Paro is going back and forth, each trying to go into a conclusion. Meanwhile, Moshe is telling, it's all or nothing. And Paro is keep on trying to, negotiate more and more. And Moshe is sticking on his grounds. So Paro goes and he says, listen. He says, all right, so how about let's compromise. All the men, go. Leave the women and children over here. And he says, no. He says, no, not going to happen. He says, we're going to go all the men, all the women, all the children, and all the animals. And you're probably going to give us some animals also when we actually go out. So he says, so Paro goes and he says, and he says, while they're going back and forth, and he sees that Moshe is not budging, he says, you know what? Forget you. I'm not sending anything. Gets all angry up with himself, self-induced rage, and he says, I'm not going and sending everybody out. Go and do what you please. So Moshe goes, and the sufficient warning was for the plague, and now the plague was going to begin. So Moshe was going to go. He extends his staff over Egypt. And this tremendous east wind was blowing all day and all night. The next morning, the locust is going to arrive with that wind. Now, what's the measure for measure? Why did they get locusts specifically? So, the Egyptians used to steal the Jewish wheat and crops. Now, the only thing that remained was the wheat and crops. Now, the locusts are going to go and they're going to steal it from the Egyptians. Furthermore, the Egyptian would deprive the Jews of any food. They would deprive them of any food. So now, any food that they have left, the locusts are going to go, and they're going to go and eat it all up. The Hebrew word for locust is arbeh, which is a variation of the word harbeh. Harbeh is what the Jews were promised to be a very in great numbers, like harbeh. So a play on words, because you try to take down the Jewish nation from being so great, then you will be brought in and be torn apart with arbeh as well. Okay, so there was seven. The locust started coming in, and the locust, it came in. Usually it comes in from one side, and it takes time for it to fly over entire. Egypt was huge. Egypt was a huge country, so it takes time for it to fly over everything. And back then, the borders, back then they ruled. They're one of the most powerful ruling nations of the world. So usually, back then, it would have taken the locust 40 days to travel across of Egypt. The miracle was that it did it all in one day. It did all in one day, and there was 7 different types of locust species. But they were, think of them as like the locust on like super steroids, like crazy looking steroids. So like almost like, as you said, like a life size amount. They had, and look, listen how the Midrash goes and explains it. He says these are locusts like you've never seen before. They had teeth like iron. Their claws were sharp like a lion. The horns, they had horns like an ox. Their necks were like a horse. The wings were powerful like an eagle. And the shape was also a little bit different. They resembled fish and snakes. And their saliva was poisonous. So it's not just your run-of-the-mill locust over here. You're talking about some serious, lab, crazy kryptonite-style locust that we're dealing with. So there was also on these locusts, it looks like they had armor. And on the armor had like sort of a letter that looked like a chet. For the like chayalim, the chayal of God's army. It was literally God sending army. These locusts, they would be able to tear apart trees, with their teeth and the claws. They go through everything. They don't leave real food. Not real food, doesn't matter. They're eating everything. So they went through their roots. They destroyed everything. Nothing was left for the Egyptians to eat. After they finished everything out in the fields, they started going into the homes of the Egyptians. And they started going to the homes, and the Egyptians, locusts is a delicacy. So they tried catching some of these locusts, killing them, and pickling them so they could eat, because the locusts ate everything. So they went and they wanted to kill these locusts, pickle them, and save them, and they'll eat them later. So they went and these locusts, they put up a fight. They had venom. They went and a lot of Egyptians died in this thing. But they actually captured a lot of locusts. They put them in barrels, they salted them, and they put them on the side. And by the way, this plague also came accompanied with one of the poisonous snakes. They like coming in. Snakes are scary stuff. Snakes are just like they're small and they slime. And so they're pretty frequent in the plagues. So they have a lot of cameos. So so you have all these locusts all over the place. The snakes crawling from under you. It was beyond what Paro, what he thought was the locust. It took him in a whole nother level. So he goes and he runs over to Moshe and Aaron, the same spiel. He goes over to them and he says, listen, he says, I've been a fool, I sinned against Hashem. He says, I sinned against Hashem. He says, please forgive me and remove the horrible locust. And he says, just do me one favor, let the Egyptians keep the locust that they captured for food. We don't have any food. So Moshe says, no can do, because no gaining from any of the locusts. But he did pray. He prayed that the locust would go out. And there was a powerful wind that came, and it carried every single locust into the sea. The locusts would be waiting on the sea for when the Egyptians come in later. We'll put them on the side for now. They're going to come and attack them a little bit again later. So but because there was no gain, you had all these dead locusts in these barrels. So there's 2 opinions of what happened to these locusts. Either the live locusts came, they flung the dead ones on their back and they flew out, or God made a miracle that these locusts came back to life and they flew out of the pots and they also escaped. Wow. So they were not able to go and to benefit at all from this. Then one of the miracles about this is Moshe prayed that the locusts should withdraw from Egypt. So because that prayer was so strong, there's never going to be locusts anymore in Egypt. There's never going to be locusts anymore in Egypt. The frogs, he just prayed that the frogs should that the plague of the frogs should come to an end, not that they should leave. So because of that, the frogs are still there, but locusts you're not going to find in Egypt. So the frogs, no. This plague, the frogs not. They came also. They came again by the wild animals. They came. So obviously, as we all know it, comes after the plague. Everything is relaxed. Paulo says, "I'm okay now. No can do. The Jews are not leaving." This is we're talking about the next plague, which is the 9th plague, which is the plague of darkness. The plague of darkness came without any warning, and we're soon going to see that it works really. That it had to be without warning specifically. So Moshe goes, and there's no warning for this one. So. There's no warning, so let's jump into the measure for measure. What's the measure for a darkness? The Egyptians used to make Jews balance candles on their head. And they used to punish them if they would fall and the candle would go out. So furthermore, also the Egyptians used to make the Jews, they shouted and they complained and they just blocked out. They blinded themselves for the suffering of the Jewish people. So now they're going to get blinded by darkness. They also imprisoned the Jews in dark cells. They forced Jews to work well into the night, in the middle of the night, sometimes through the night. So because of all these things, the plague of darkness are going to go and befall on the Egyptians. There is also, unfortunately, this is a plague that actually affected the Jews as well. And the reason is that there were many Jews that were undeserving of the redemption. They were the wealthy people, very, very wealthy people of Egypt, that they were not really subject to the same torments as the Jewish brothers. And they were comfortable in their lives in Egypt. And they didn't want to go. They weren't interested in accepting the Torah. America is good for us. Let's stay in America. It was back then, it was Egypt.
Slaves.
Some of them were not slaves. Yeah, some of them they had a high power.
How do they even become so wealthy and like?
So you look at, let's say, for example, Dasan and Abiran. They ratted out to the, so there's different ways they got out. So and Dasan and Abiran was one of those that didn't want to leave as well.
So everybody who was wealthy, they were.
Not everybody. No, but there were many of them in that. Yeah. So he says, so they go and they say, why do we need to leave? We don't want to accept the Torah. We want to stay right here. So because of their sinfulness that these wicked Jews had, that they were going to die in this plague. And the reason why specifically in this plague is that the Egyptians should not see that, the Jews are also suffering from this plague. It's not just us. So because of that, God made it specifically in their darkness. So they wouldn't see the Jews dying. The Jews would go and bury their fellow brothers, and they didn't even know.
That's very nice.
So
was it like only 1/5 that left?
yeah, we're going to go to that.
1/5 of Jews.
We're going to get to that. So the way that when this darkness, plague started, it started not in the middle of the night. So you think, okay, middle of the night, it just never got dark again for a whole week. It wasn't like that. It was in broad daylight, the strongest time, when the sun is shining the strongest, which is the third hour, the halachic hours of the day. That's when it all turned into darkness. So it came like a swarm of darkness. It was an intense darkness, that so dark that if you Egyptian would put their hand right in front of it, they couldn't see anything. Even after they adjust to it, even after they could, it was palpable. It was a palpable darkness. So much so they tried to light candles, it would distinguish. It would distinguish. It was a distinguished candle that extinguished itself. So they were. It was smothered with darkness. But to even more so, this darkness was toxic. It gave off toxic fumes. So they had to cover their mouths and their noses to be able to breathe without getting hurt and damaged. So this, like we said before, wasn't the most pleasant time for the Jews. This is the part where the Jews started dying. This is where
they didn't die?
well, some of them did, but majority of them stayed up, stuck with it. So there were Egyptians that died throughout all the plagues the Egyptians died. No, also this. So.
I heard that it was so dark that they froze.
We're going to get to that. So for the first 3 days, this darkness only lasts for 6 days. The first 3 days of darkness was darkness that the Egyptians would be able to move, but they couldn't see anything, and this is where they had the toxic fumes and they were moving around. This is the part of when the Jews had to bury their Jewish brothers and when they passed away, which is, you're talking about 4/5 of the Jews, 80% of the Jewish population died. Surprisingly, or I actually shouldn't say surprisingly, but strangely, Dasan and Abiran did not perish in this plague. They stayed up. So we'll explain afterwards. So there's too much. So this darkness it made the Egyptians really ill. Now after these 3 days of darkness finished, the darkness intensified. You're talking about quadrupled the so much so that they were frozen in place. And when they were frozen in place, so you're talking about there was 3 days of regular darkness. It wasn't regular darkness; it was even super darkness, where they would be able to move. And then 3 days, you were sitting, you stayed wherever you were sitting for 3 days. You are middle of standing. You are in that in-between position. That's where you stayed for 3 days. You were, whichever position you are, you couldn't move. Now, one of the problems is that the toxics, the fumes were still there, and they were forced to smell and breathe in this toxics. And the miracle is that most of them did not die. They kept alive through this. But you think about it: no eating, no drinking, 3 days, just sitting in one spot, you go crazy. And then put above that, there's these toxic fumes that are going on. But God made sure their mind stayed sharp. They stayed sharp, and while they had all this, this frozen state, they saw visions. They saw demons and evil spirits are coming in there. So, to make matters worse, it made a little bit and all that extra scarier. The Egyptians, though, the Jews at this plague, after they buried the dead, they went and they sort of just roamed the Egyptians' town, and they started walking into their houses. The Egyptians would be able to hear the Jews in their house. And they hear them, they were shuffling around, be like, oh, what's this? What do we have over here? The Jews did not take one single thing. They didn't take anything, but the Egyptians saw that the Jews were rummaging around in their houses. And we'll see. We'll soon see. So, the Jews are having a good time. Meanwhile, the Egyptians are seeing the Jews. They see this vision. The Jews are having a good time. They see these evil spirits. They can't move, and they're suffering. And with these fumes. This is how it lasted for 3 days. One of the reasons that they went and they searched around the house is the Jews went to see where all the Egyptians kept their gold and their silver and all their expensive valuables. Because before we leave Egypt, God tells Moshe to go tell the Jews to go borrow all these valuables from the Egyptians, because God promised Abraham that the Jewish nation would go into a land of slavery, but He also promised that they will say be'uchush gadol, they will go out with a tremendous value of wealth. He says, I kept my end of the deal where they were in slavery. They're going out with a lot of money. So now, when the Jews are going to come to the Egyptians, and they're going to say, can we borrow some? There's a really nice bowl that I like. Do you by any chance have it? The Jews are going to be like, oh no, I don't think I had that. I'll be like, no. I saw it in the plague of darkness. It's in your third closet and to the left, right in the above, behind the crystal bowl. No. So they went, and this is one of the purposes that it was darkness. But one of the miracles. What?
It's not like they had night vision.
Yeah.
Why do you want anything of theirs?
Well, we'll soon see. We'll get to that when we hope B'ezrat Hashem when we do the actual part of the Yetziat Mitzrayim. So. All right. It's gonna be a while. All right. So. All right, let's pick up the speed a little bit. So now they had this, you had this, the Jews knew where everything was. The Egyptians now came out of their darkness. Now realize all the plagues lasted for 7 days, except for this one lasted for 6 days, because one plague of darkness is going to be saved in also for the time of the crossing of the sea. So we have locusts put on the side also, and that's going to come back, and the plague of darkness is also going to come back. So now, Paro goes over, he was really nervous about this plague of darkness. He says, who knows what's going to be in the future. He calls Moshe and Aaron to the royal palace. He says, I have a new offer for you. Paro is still negotiating. This guy does not learn his lesson. He comes in and he says, new offer. Take your men, take your women, take your children, even take your babies, but leave me the animals. So I know you're going to come back to me. So Moshe says, no deal. We're going to take the woman, we're going to take the children, we're going to take the men, and we're going to take the animals. And he says, we got to take all the animals. We don't know which ones God is going to want us to sacrifice. So, angry that Paul, they're not Moshe's not listening to Paul's all his negotiation tactics. So he says, all right. He says, enough with you. Get out of my face. Paul tells Moshe, and I never want to see you again. So Moshe says, you've spoken well, because I will never come to see you again in your palace. And he says, but Moshe tells him, he says, but you're soon going to come see me. And he says, because there's going to be another plague. And this next plague is going to be administered by none other than God himself. And when Moshe was about to leave, that God wanted to give Moshe his prophecy now. Usually, God didn't give a prophecy to Moshe in the palace because it was full of idols. But being that Moshe said he's never going to come in again, God wanted to make sure that he's going to stick to his word. So God lifted Moshe 10 tefachim above the ground. He's literally hovering. Gives him the last prophecy. He says the last prophecy is going to be with the death of the firstborn. And he goes and he tells Moshe to tell Paro to warn him about this plague. So he lands again, and he goes and he tells Paro, and he says, listen, there's going to be one more plague, the plague of darkness. He says, and when Paro, and he tells him, it's going to be exactly at midnight, and they're going to come, and all the firstborn in Egypt are going to die. And Paro hears this, and he starts laughing. He says, that's your big finale. He says, all the firstborn. He says, how many people are going to be firstborn over here? He says, the majority of us are not firstborn. So Moshe starts smiling back at him. He says, no. He says, not. He says, firstborn from anybody. It could be a firstborn, because they were very promiscuous. So each household could have 5 firstborns, 10 firstborns. They go this guy, or they go this woman, and this. So they go. So any firstborn will get killed, but even more so than firstborns. It's going to be anybody who even is the head of a household, or anybody who presents himself as a firstborn. If he just makes himself for the honors of the first, because firstborn is a lot of honors, he also got in. Thinking you're just going to take the honors, you're not going to get the other thing. You're going to get that as well. So there was a few things that are going to come out, and he says, "Oh, trust me." He says, "You're going to come running to me," and Moshe goes and he leaves, and he turns around, no respect to Paro anymore with backing. Turns around and just and leaves the palace. So the night that the Egyptians firstborn were supposed to die, there was first of all there was a very big miracle that when the angel of death came, there was usually the dogs bark. They sense certain things. The dogs barked in all of Egypt except in the Jewish thing. Not a single dog barked, and because of that, the great reward that God even rewards those that any unfit, unkosher slaughter, whatever it is, impure meat, you give to the dogs. You give it to the dogs. So the plague begins, and this plague, there is not even one household that survived anything. Some household had 5 or 10 deaths. That's how serious it was. It wasn't just one person that died. So the Paro, at this point in time, before we're going to go even further into the story of the firstborn. Actually, no, I take it back. I'm sorry, I went too far. The plague did not start yet. I have to insert something before that. It's called Pesach. Before the start of the plague of the death of the firstborn, God gave a mitzvah to the Jewish people. First of all was Kiddush HaChodesh. You have to sanctify the new moon, and God explained to him, that when the Jewish calendar works by the moon. So when you see a new moon, that's when the new month begins. Now we have it as a calendar, but back then, the way that it used to be is they used to have 2 witnesses. They would testify when they see the beginning of the new moon, and that's when the new month began. Ordinarily, the months back then. By the way, we have Nisan, Iyar, we have all these Hebrew months. Those months are never written in the Torah. Those ones were put in later by the Chachamim. It was during the time of the destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash. But the way that the Torah goes and explains months, it's how many months since the Exodus of Egypt. So if, let's say, you're 1 month since the Exodus, 2 months since the Exodus, originally the new year would be Rosh Hashanah, which is, Tishrei, which is when Adam HaRishon was born. That's when usually, but now, this superseded, the Exodus of Egypt superseded even in the accounting sense, and therefore from now on, the first Nisan is when the new year is where you say the first month, and then the second month, and so on and so forth.
Farsi names, the month?
No, they were Persian. Maybe they are a sense from Persian of more like an Aramaic. Think of it like the Gemara and the Mishnah in that type of language. But they all had secret meanings to it. It's all through Kabbalistic. It wasn't just like it's the month of the goat, so we'll call it whatever it is, the goat month. So now after that, there was another mitzvah that God gave them, which was the mitzvah of Karban Pesach. Karban Pesach has to be a lamb or a goat that would be sacrificed on the 14th day of Nisan. And you have to eat it that night, the 15th day of Nisan. And on that night that you eat the Karban Pesach is when God's going to destroy all the firstborns, all the firstborns. And the eating of the Karban Pesach is the symbolization where God is going to say, okay, the person, you're eating it, you're in the house, and there's a few other character traits that go in. You get saved, you're not, and you're not. So the Karban Pesach symbolizes where the Jews were saved from their death, and the Egyptians were not saved from the death.
Karban Pesach was after death of the
No, before. It was before. Yeah, I jumped the gun. My apologies. So this to stick this in beforehand. So because I'm trying to make it as chronological as possible. So the animal that they had to do was a lamb or a goat. The lamb is the astrological sign of the month of Nisan, and it's also the animal that the Egyptians worship. And it's sort of declaring that the Egyptian gods are nothing. Is that we're literally slaughtering and eating your God. What was the question?
The goat. You said it's going to lamb.
Lamb or goat. It could be a lamb or a goat.
Lamb is
But
Nisan, what's
what's
goat?
the
Which month?
significance of a goat if the lamb is the
Nisan.
Oh.
sign of the month and
Yeah.
for God, but what about is the goat also?
No, not that. It could be. I'm sure they worship that also, but specifically it was the lamb. The lamb. I'll tell you why specifically. The lamb was specifically in the month of Nisan. That's an astrological sign, and even more so is that. So maybe they all did lambs at that point in time. I'm not familiar. It could be, but the lambs, the astrological sign is strongest in every in the middle of the month. And when did they slaughter them? In the middle of the month, the 15th of the month. So.
Actually, that they had to slaughter them outside and cook them outside.
Oh, we'll soon see. Yeah.
So it's
In their face. Yeah. Oh, it smelled good. Trust me, it smelled good. Okay, so generally, we don't have the time to go through the laws of the Karban Pesach, which I would have preferred to do. But I'll give you a brief idea of it. It's this lamb or goat is 1 year old. It has to be observed for 4 days to make sure that there's no blemish. And then what they did is after you slaughter it, you roast it over fire, the whole thing, and then you take the blood that fell in it and you put it on the doorpost. And the way you put it on the doorpost is you put it on the the left side, the right side, and on the top. And it sort of makes a chet for chayim, for life. And this is where the God passes over those with the doorpost. So meanwhile the firstborns, everyone's gathering around. They see a bunch of sheep tied to people's beds, like just hanging around there. Be like, what you guys doing with our gods? So they're like, he's like, you didn't hear? He's like, we're going to slaughter them and eat them. And it's a kalban. And they explain. He says, listen, there's going to be a death of the firstborn are going to die, and God's going to save us because we're going to have, they're explaining that, the situation. They were like, we'll come. Circle back to that again. He says, what did you say about the firstborns? Because a lot of them were firstborns. He says, all the firstborn are going to die. So they ran over to their fathers. They're like, Papa, whatever Egyptians call Papa, right? So they says, did you hear about this? He says, what are we doing? He says, I don't want to die. Moshe's 9 for 9 at this point in time. Everything that he says is right. He says, get the Jews out of here. I want to live. And Paul says, the father says, what are you doing to me? He says, go. He says, actually the father says, we're not leaving the Jews. I don't care what happens, the Jews are staying over here. And the sons got really angry. So he says, go speak to Paul. So they went to Paul and they ran to Paul and they says, what are you doing? He says, let the Jews out. What, are you going to kill us? So Paul says, he says, who sent you here? He's like, our fathers told us to come to you. He says, so Paul got really angry. He said, I want your fathers killed. He's like, what are you sending me all these headaches? So meanwhile, in Egypt, before this, there's a civil war going on over here. And there was a lot of kids over here that killed their fathers. He's like, what do you mean you're not going to stick up for me? And they go back and forth, and they actually murdered their own fathers. And it was complete civil strife broke out in Egypt. It was going on everywhere. It was haywire. So not only is the plague going to be on firstborn people, it's going to also be on firstborn animals. And not only is it only going to be on the firstborn animals, all Egyptian gods are going to be destroyed in this plague. If it was a god of metal, it would melt. If it would be a stone, it would just crumble or dissolve. If it would be of wood, it would rot. So God will destroy also all the idols, all the avodah zarah. So they wouldn't think that anything else can actually possibly protect them. The only thing that would protect them is the blood on the doorposts. So the Egyptians go and they start getting really nervous. And meanwhile, it's getting closer, and the time is to shech the Kabon Pesach. And some of the Jews over there, one of the prerequisites in order to eat a Kabon Pesach is you have to be circumcised. And not all the Jews are circumcised yet. So and they didn't want to. They still want to be meshing with the Egyptian society. They didn't want to commit so far in. So. The time for there was a 14th of Nisan, and it was a time appointed for the sacrifice of the Kabon Pesach. And they started slaughtering the Kabon Pesach, and they started roasting it on fire. And God made such an amazing smell come out of this thing. It was like the smell of Gan Eden. And it started wafting through the air. And the Jews started coming over and be like, he's like, I gotta have a piece of that. He's like, you gotta cut me off a seat. He's like, we can't. He says, only if you have to brit milah. Just do it. I need that. It tastes so delicious, and they were willing to do that. So much so that it even went to the Egyptians. Who's their god? They're roasting their god. The Egyptians came in, the saliva dripping from their mouth, and be like, "You guys have to give us some of that thing, please." And he says, "No, you can't. It says a non-Jew's not allowed to have it." So they went and they converted. They converted to see. You could convert with a good meal. No.
How is that a true conversion?
We'll soon see. They cause a lot of problems. So they went, and you had a lot of people that converted over here. They converted to Judaism. Besides the fact, they also saw all these, all these miracles that God did. So they went and they actually converted, and they were able to eat in the Kabon Pesach. And these later known to be the Erev Rav. But what?
They said 20% that are left did the Brit Milah, right?
Yeah. That's true. That's right. That's true. So now the Egyptians used to torment the Jews the same way. Is that they used to cook something really nice and smells good, and they'll be like, no, you can't have anything. So now right back at them it went. So now the death of the firstborn is going to begin. Before, do we have time? You know what? I'm gonna go through this. As long as it takes. I can't skip too much. Okay. So the 14th of Nisan and the 15th of Nisan has a very, very strong, amazing, things in Jewish history. For example, Haman, when he wanted to build that big tree and which to hang Mordechai on, and the same night, basically the night that Haman's downfall was also of the 15th of Nisan. The Sodom was also destroyed the 15th of Nisan. Sisera and his armies were annihilated this 15th of Nisan. Daniel was, he got out unharmed in the lion's den, the 15th of Nisan. Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, when he used the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash, died also on the 15th of Nisan. Avraham Avinu, when he went to war against the four kings, also was the 15th of Nisan. And we also spoke about a story last week where there was a woman, Rachel, Rachel, the daughter of Suselach, that had a baby and it went into the cement right away. They just threw it right away in. And because of that, the angel went and they brought it up to Paro. They brought it up to, not to Paro, they brought it up to God. And because of that, it was decreed that exactly 1 year from that point in time, the Egyptians are going to die. The Egyptian firstborn are going to die. So it was that also happened on the 15th of Nisan. So comes over here the 15th of Nisan, and exactly midnight, usually it's really dark, it became light as day, because God wanted the Egyptians to see it. Not just because back now you have lights, so nighttime is. But back then, dark is, nighttime is you don't see anything unless you have a candle, and then you're able to see something. But God made it light as day, so everybody could see.
9th continued into the 10th place.
No. This is not the Makkah of darkness. This is light. There's light over here. Now, how did these people die? So there was a poisonous gas that started coming down through the ear, and every firstborn that inhaled this gas died. But the miracle was that the Egyptians that were not firstborn did not die. They smelled the gas and they did not die. So, but there were other people that died a different way. There were other ones. God came down basically. That He did it. God Himself went and killed all the firstborn. So there was tremendous noise, thunder and lightning. Some of them actually died just from the noise. Others died without anything, without the gas, without the noise, just simply like that. They just died. One group of them died instantly. Another group of them died. They struggled for life until the morning. And a third group, they were deathly ill for 3 days, and then they died. So the miracle thing is like, let's say, for example, the lightning, the thunders, and things like that did not harm the other Egyptians. Only the firstborns. Only the firstborns are the ones that died. No Jews died over here. So the firstborn animals died as well. Now, even more so, there was a woman that was in the palace when Moshe was giving Paro the warning that now there's not going to be a household that's not going to be suffering. It's not going to be crying out and screaming because of the death of the firstborn. There was a woman over there, a little chutzpanit woman, that she goes up and she says, "Oh yeah?" She says, "I'm not going to be suffering anything." She says, "I don't have any kids. I'm by myself. Who am I going to mourn for?" And Moshe says, "Don't worry, you're going to scream the loudest." And he leaves. So after that, so. Besides the death of the firstborn, there was more. There was bonus to this makkah. That the Egyptians, what they used to do is they used to sculpt this sculpture. If they had a kid that died, they would sculpt the sculpture of this kid, and they would put it like one of their rooms, and they would dance to it, and they would sing to it, and so much as if this person was alive. Now, when God came in to destroy to kill all the firstborns, God also destroyed all these images that were going on. So this woman who was there, she started screaming one of the first because she had her firstborn died, and God went and destroyed that particular thing that He had, that shrine that she had in her statue, memorizing her first dead child, was destroyed to pieces, and it was like now she was like completely alone in the world. She was screaming to the high heavens. So even more so was that there were dogs that just came in, and these dogs, they came and they started digging in the ground in the Egyptian cemetery, and they pulled out these corpses of the family members that these Egyptians had, and they brought them and they started basically ripping apart the dead family members that the Egyptian had. So all their ancestors were they were defiled, and it was tragedy from all ends. They were getting beaten up. The Egyptians that were sort of scared of this, and they knew that what Moshe says is God's word, and then everything is going to happen. So they were nervous. So they went and they brought their kids into the Jewish home. Some of them even put them in the same beds as the Jews. And God went in, and the Egyptian died, and the Jews slept like a baby. Didn't even wake up. The Jews slept. They slept great. They slept amazing. So they're sleeping the entire day. Meanwhile, there was not a house in Egypt that was not screaming and crying from pain and suffering and also depression. So one of the reasons that Hashem destroyed also the Egyptian gods as well is that no one could ever say that it was one of the Egyptian gods that did these things. So blotting them out one by one. God destroyed every Egyptian god except for one. The one is called Baal Tzafon. Baal Tzafon, Hashem allowed this idol to remain. Thank you. Hashem allowed this idol to remain, sort of to allude to make them think that there's a power to this god. They wanted to still, and we'll see. We're gonna come to it later. So the Paro goes and people are dying left and right, and Paro was nervous. Because on one opinion, he was a firstborn. Last week we spoke about that he was actually a second child. So even so, he was still the head of the household. He still had many reasons that he also was going to die. And he knew that he was going to die as well.
Didn't his son die also?
No, Batya was his firstborn. So he goes and he starts he starts running. There's only one place he could run to, and that's Moshe. He says, you got to stop this place. He sees everyone's dying. Also the firstborn. He's next. So he starts running. So he goes and he starts running to find Moshe. Meanwhile, the Egyptian firstborns are dying left and right. But it wasn't just the Egyptian. If let's say somebody came to visit, a foreigner came to visit, and they were firstborn, they also died. So they wouldn't think that it's their God that was protecting them or something like that. Everybody died. If they had captives in their dungeons and they were firstborn, they also died. So they wouldn't think, oh yeah, my God, because you captured me, is killing all you guys out. So they also died. So nobody could possibly say that it was anything else other than God. So Paro goes and he takes Batya and he starts running. Batya we know is who raised Moshe, and he's pulling out all the cards now. So he goes.
I thought he cared about her.
I don't know how much he cared about her. Maybe he did.
Okay.
No, he's
So
trying to use it as a
yeah. So he goes and he runs. He runs to the Jewish part of town, and he goes into town and he starts screaming, Moshe, 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 where are you, Moshe and Aaron? He starts screaming. Meanwhile, he gets God told all the Jews, you have to stay inside. You cannot go outside in the plague of darkness, because once the angel of death goes around, it could, so you're safe if you stay inside. So everybody was inside.
I thought it was not darkness anymore because
I'm sorry, the plague of Makat Bechot. Thank you. That wasn't not the darkest. It was the plague of Makat Bechot. So Paro is screaming, and God made it sound like the whole Egypt. It went out. His voice was like a loudspeaker that everybody heard him. Crying like a baby and trying to get Moshe. So he runs into the Jewish part of town and he starts knocking on people's doors. Where's Moshe? Where's Moshe? So they go and they start playing around with him. You ever ask an Israeli how to directions? It says, okay, listen. You go straight. You go straight. You make a right. You go straight. You make another right. You go make a left right away, and you go straight. You see it right over there. And so Paro is knocking in, and so the Jews, the same with the Galinim, you go straight. So he's going over there, and these Jewish, little children, they're like, oh, you want Moshe? No problem. Go straight, make a right over there. So he goes and he follows the direction, but they send him to the wrong place. And he's like, Moshe. It's like, no. You want Moshe? Okay. No, where you come from? Okay, no, you got to go. You go straight over there and make a round by the garbage. Go, keep on going straight. I left over there. Moshe's right over there, and he's running all over town. He's screaming in his pajamas, right, all over. That's what the kids sing and nothing. Power pajamas in the middle of the night. He's running back and forth. It was a comical. You have your. And by the way, you remember how tall he was, right? So sure. It was right. Yeah. So it made it all the more so that comical. So he's running. And finally, after who knows what, he finally gets and he finds Moshe. He finds Moshe and he's knocking on the door of Moshe. And he goes and he says, Moshe, I need to speak to you. He says, Moshe says, I'm sorry, I can't come out. He says, and by the way, didn't you tell me you never want to see my face again? Mm-hmm. So he's like. So Paul says, listen, he says, I need to talk to you. He says, all right, so talk. So he starts saying, you said, Paul goes to him and says, you said only the firstborn are going to die. He says, there's so many more than the firstborn that died. So Moshe says, listen, I told you, it's not only the firstborn from the family. It's going to be any firstborn, anything that's related to that. It's going to go. So Paul says, okay, fine, listen, you win. I kneel down. It's yours. You go. Get out of my land. You take everybody. I'll give you my animals. Just get out of here right now. I want you out of here right now. This minute. So Moshe says, listen, what's the rush? He says, middle of the night. Let us rest a little bit. He says, we're going to leave in the night like thieves. So besides, God told us we can't leave at night. We'll go in the morning when it's daybreak. Then we'll leave then. So Paul gives him the go-ahead. But Moshe goes and he tells them, he says, listen, you have to start announcing that the Jews are no more longer slaves, and you have to, you free us. So he was only required to say it once. But he's so scared, he's like screaming it again and again and again and again. He's like screaming, you're free, just get out of here, get out of my land. So just pray for my life. So Moshe goes, and Batya was there also. And Batya goes over to him and says, I raised you. This is how you repay me. I raised you in the palace. So Moshe goes over to Batya and he says, were you ever harmed in any of the plagues? And she says, to be honest, no. He says, you're not going to be harmed, and don't worry, you're not going to die in the first-born plague either. You are going to be saved because of the kindness that you showed me.
Wait, I thought it was only for men.
No, man, woman, anybody. Yeah. Woman, any firstborn. No discrimination over here.
Because the firstborn of Jews died when.
Because they're male boys.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. So no, you know why? Because we are considered the firstborn nation to God. So that's why their firstborn also died. But okay, let's move on. So this, in fact, was actually very revealing to the Egyptians. When the Egyptians saw that 5 of their kids died, so the husband goes over to the wife and be like, wait a minute. He says, why do we have 5 deaths over here? and so it sort of started coming out, all the promiscuity was going out, and be like, what I only have 1 kid? So they could have had 10 kids, all of them could have died. He says, what does that mean? He says, that means that I only had 1 kid, the rest of us would have, so it causes, shalom bayit problems as well. So the entire these firstborns, they're all strawn out throughout the entire streets, dying. God made them, some of them die, live till the morning, so that the Jews would be able to see them that actually fall out in death, and also the Egyptians were able to witness on of what will happen in the morning. So comes the morning, and it's a mad rush for the Jews to leave. Paro is trying to kick them out, but God commanded them and says, listen, we got to strip Egypt of its wealth. Go ask and borrow for some we'll get to that. Yeah. So go borrow some treasures from there. So the Jews had to go, and they started. Now the Jews, when you get a freedom, be like, I just want to book out of here. Forget about the money right now. Let's just leave. But there was a commandment. God says you have to go and get all this money. So twist the Jew's hand. You got to go get money. We'll get money. Fine. So he goes, and they go, and they start knocking on all the doors, and they start. And they start, asking for that. Not only the Egyptians wanted them out so fast, they said, take this, and here's a bonus, and take this also. They even things that they didn't even want. They just leave. We had enough of you already. They destroyed. If you realize, Egyptian society, the Egyptian land was completely demolished. From every single aspect of it, from A to Z, from top to bottom, was done. So the Jews amassed so much wealth that they needed 90 donkeys just to carry the personal fortune of each and every single Jew. Each and every single Jew, 90 donkeys. Each Jew had enough resources to build his own Mishkan. That's how wealthy they were. So Egypt has lost everything. Everything.
What happened to Avira and...
Nasan?
Yeah.
Nasan and Avion?
Yes.
We'll get to them.
Were they still alive?
Yeah. So...
But the Paro's son died, right?
No, Paro's firstborn was Batya. So now it could be. I'm sure his other firstborns died as well. I'm sure he didn't have just one. So, but in any case, what the Midrashim says is it does. I haven't read and focused on that. But anyways, let's move on because we still have to do. Okay, all right. So the king, this whole story is comparable to to like a king, where you have a king that goes and tells his servant to make him a fish. The servant goes, makes him a fish, but it's a spoiled fish, and the king takes it, he spits it out, and he says, you know what? I'll give you a choice. You have three options. Number 1, eat the whole fish, and that's your punishment. Number 2, you will suffer 100 lashes, or number 3, you have to pay me 100 gold coins. So the slave doesn't have that much money. He says, pass over the fish. He starts eating the fish. He's getting halfway through it, and he's like gagging. He's like, I can't. He's like, just give me the lashes. And the king starts lashing him. He gets like 50. He's like, I can't already. It's too much. And he pays up the 100 gold coins. Says if that fool would have just paid up the 100 gold coins at the beginning, he would have, went around it. The same thing with Paro. Paro had the ability to avoid all this punishment. Had he would have just let the Jews go, he would have been okay.
They would have really went just for 3 days.
In the beginning, that's what they said. The question is how they would have, escaped that. What Moshe told Paro is, all I want is 3 days to sacrifice.
Why did they need Paro's permission? Why couldn't they just?
They can't leave it. There were slaves. It was that place was certified with magic that you couldn't get out. It was, they had 120,000 Egyptian officers protecting the borders. There was no what? There was no. That was not the answer, wasn't it?
No, I was just gonna say, if Hashem can make miracles to do all these plagues
Yeah.
that go
He could have done it with one plague. He could have done one plague. All Egypt just dropped dead. Just every single one just dropped dead. Or everyone just turned to 1,000 years old. They couldn't move. They know the bad arthritis. And they would just like walk right over them. But there's a reason specifically why it was done this way. It was done this way to show everything. Everything was we didn't have the chance to go into depth in it and what each plague actually proved and all that. But it all it had a reason for it. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there anything said about like the 10 plagues correlating to like 10 sefirot?
Yeah, there's different things on that. Yeah, there's many the 10 mamarim, the 10 first sayings of the creation of the world. There's many things on that.
Where can we read that? You can tell me after.
Yeah. Okay. So there's actually many sources for that. There's some Haggadot that also brings it down. But anyway, let's move on because So the while the Jews were going and collecting all this, you want to turn on the heat? So the Egyptians, while the Jews were getting all their while the Jews are getting all the Egyptian wealth, Moshe was doing two other things. He wasn't going for the wealth. He had to do, number one, he was arranging that there was trees that were planted that were supposed to be used for the Mishkan are going to be transported, and additionally, the promise was that Yosef's coffin has to be taken out of Egypt. So he was looking for Yosef's coffin, but he couldn't find it. He couldn't find the coffin so he asked the Serach bat Asher, who was the only surviving member of the children of the Shvatim, and she said that that Yosef was buried in the Nile, and they buried him in the Nile because they thought it would give blessings to the Nile, because he was very powerful, and he actually saved Egypt. So what they did was that they put a lot of weight on his coffin, and it sunk to the ground. Now go figure, you can't go scuba diving now in the Nile, try to find the thing. So Moshe went and he took a sheet of gold and he carved out on it Aleh Shol. Shol was one of the representation of Yosef. So he threw this into the water and Shol, ox, and the coffin started floating up. He went and he took the coffin, and the coffin was really heavy. It was also the other tribes are also inside that coffin. The other remains are also that. So they went and they took the coffin, and Moshe himself took the coffin. He took it, and this is what he was carrying. And meanwhile, that sheet of gold, there was a little mischievous person by the name of Micha that got saved by the bricks. Well, I don't know if we'll get to him. Maybe when we continue the story. He took this sheet of gold and saved it for later. We'll soon see where, probably in our next series where he used that. So the Jews, meanwhile, being pressed for time, the Egyptians are forcing them out. The Jews have to leave. They had this fresh dough that they were still kneading. They couldn't do it. They couldn't finish it. So they took the leftover. They took over the dough, and they also took over the leftover matzah that they had from last night from Maro. They had Pesach the night before.
How were they making bread to begin with for the journey?
Yeah. So they took this and they held it, even though they had all these donkeys that they would be able to go and put it on, but they appreciated the mitzvot of matzah and all these things so much. I said, no, I know we have plenty of places to put it. I want to hold it. It was that special to them that they wanted to hold it. So they pulled it to hold it. They also put it on their backs. So and this is where it says, the Midrash says that the sun came out and it baked the matzot. It baked it on their backs, and that's what they were able to eat. So this matzah actually lasted them for 30 days. From the 15th of Nisan until the 15th of Iyar, when they started receiving the man. And so this matzah actually lasted them. So the Jews started traveling. They get out of Egypt. They all assemble in Ramses. I have this map over here. I don't think the camera is going to be able to see it, but so you see over here. Here's Goshen. Here is where the Jews all. This was the worst part of their subjugations in there. So the Jews were all over Egypt. So they all united over here, and they're going to travel from here as a one nation outside of Egypt. So they all. This whole thing is Egypt. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a brief idea. Okay, so this is an ancient map. So this is Egypt. This is the Nile over here. This is the Red Sea. Okay, over here is Elat. This is Israel. Okay, this side is Israel over here. Here you have Libya. Here you have Jordan. Saudi Arabia is down here, and you have over here. Here's Elat. So you see this. I actually drew it, but this line over here is the current border of Egypt to Israel, and Jordan you have it on this side. So this is but we're coming in from this side. This is the side where the Jews are coming out of Egypt.
And they're going to Har Sinai.
To the left?
No. From the opposite end, from the Red Sea, from this part.
What's 1, 2, 3?
This is their ways. We're going to get to that. How they traveled. The order. What? Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, but you said they were spread out through Egypt. I thought they were all in Goshen.
There were majority of them more, but they were still, throughout the land. So they go and they start making their way out of Egypt. Now, when they came out of Egypt, we know that they had the clouds of glory. The clouds of glory there was in front of them, behind them, on all sides, up and below, all over them, and they had also. They would go to them. They also had a pillar of fire. So they went out and they were traveling. By the way, this Ananei Kavod, if there was mountains, it leveled it. They didn't even have to walk so much. It was sort of carried them in this thing. It was like an elevator. If there was a mountain, so they don't have to climb up the mountain and then down the mountain. They didn't have to go around it. The clouds. No, the cloud just leveled the ground and they kept on going straight. And if there was scorpions or all these things, the clouds took care of that. It was such miraculous clouds that it kept the temperature nice. It was amazing. So they were going, and they traveled from Ramses. They went and they traveled to part number 1, what's written over here, which is Sukkot. Okay, this is where they went to. This is their first stop. So they went into it, and as they finally, like when somebody's at war and they have the adrenaline, they're able to go through, but the second that you get freed and everything is okay, then all the realization starts sinking in. And the strength that they had just started flushing out of them. And they started, what they went through for 210 years of severe slavery, that a lot of them became really severely ill at that point in time. So the clouds, there was some sort of miracle with the clouds also, that they went and they healed everybody. And they came back to full health. So they went out, and when they went to Egypt, they also included a crazy amount. They had 2 million last-minute Egyptian converts.
Wow.
There were 600,000, Jewish men from the age of 20, 2 million Egyptians converts. That's how many. And including in them is none other than the sons of Bilam, Janus and Yambus.
No.
Yep, they came in as well. Moshe, God says it's not going to be good to bring them along. Moshe prayed for them, and God says, if you want, go ahead. We'll soon say they're going to come to. They're not going to be so helpful.
Jewish men and
Just so
two
nice.
No, 2 million Egyptians. Yeah.
million.
Basically, total there was like 3 million Jews and 2 million Egyptians.
Yeah, because you're saying, so 600,000 Jewish men of that age, but then you had also the younger man, the older man, then you had the woman, the children.
Almost already outnumbered them.
Yeah, they were tremendous.
600,000, 20 to age 60? 20
Yeah. So now the 20 to 70. So they go and I don't know. I was right. 20 to 60. Yeah, 20 to 70 something else. So they go and they start making their way out of town with their whole tremendous amount. They take all the Egyptians as well, and they're all going out over there. So the Egyptians, though, the punishments and the plagues was not over yet. What happened was that it was known that the Jews are going to be going into Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, where the Plishtim are holding the land, and they are going to take over the land. And they hear that these Plishtim hear that these Jews are coming into, they're going to be coming in towards. They left Egypt, which means they're on the way to their land. So they go up and they destroy the entire land. They destroyed the entire land because when the Jews come, they're not going to have anything. So they ripped up the grounds and they destroyed buildings. They basically destroyed their own land. But meanwhile, they didn't realize the Jews weren't coming in there yet. So meanwhile, they had to go and they had to rebuild themselves. And So the Jews go and they start to make their way out to Egypt. Now, out of Egypt, when they go over there, they all congregated. They all ended up in Sukkot. So Sukkot is over here, right near the.
Is that a place?
Yeah, it's called Sukkot. Yeah, that was the day number 1. On day number 1, they left. They reached to Sukkot. So they traveled this in one day. From the second day, they traveled from Sukkot. They went to this place called Itam, right over here. So they went and they didn't. How did they know where to go? They had the GPS. The GPS was a nice pillar of clouds, and it was just directing them exactly where to go. There was actually a huge vertical beam that reached from the sky to the ground, to also point them in the direction that they need to go. Now, when night came, night in the desert is very cold, dangerous, and that. So you had there was a pillar of light that gave them the heat, and it basically, the pillar of light protected them at night, the clouds protected them during the day. And they protected them from everything, from the animals, from the heat, from the level, from the pits, everything that possibly go wrong, the snakes, everything they were taken care of. So, meanwhile, the Paro, for some reason...
But you left with them too, right?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so, yeah. You're right. So, they're traveling from here. Then, by the third day of their travels, it was Shabbos, so they rested. It was Shabbat, so they rested, they didn't go. And on Sunday, which is the fourth day out of Egypt, they started traveling, further away. Now, during this time, the Paro, when he sent out the Jews, he sent out a small Egyptian army as well to escort them. Basically, he was, even though he told them you're free, he basically wanted them back after 3 days. It was under his understanding, you're going to go out for 3 days and you come back over here.
So this is still for 3 days?
Yeah. So all your questions will get answered. We have to plow through because we're not going to get... No, it's not a problem. But because we have a lot and it's getting late. So let's just try to plow as fast. But most of your questions will B'ezrat Hashem get answered. If not, I'll be here as long as you need me. We'll go through through all those things. So now, until his time, so answer your question, yeah, he thought it was still going to be 3 days. It was 3 days that were coming up. Now it was the fourth day already. So the Egyptian, people that were around there were like, all right, listen, time to head back to Egypt. It's been 3 days out. You gotta make your way back. So the Jewish people says, no, not really going back to Egypt. So they said, well, you better go back to Egypt. So the Jewish people went and they jumped on these soldiers and they started, they killed some and wounding others. And all these soldiers went and they started running back out to, they ran back out to Egypt to tell Paro that there's no interest these Jews in coming back home, back to their rightful place.
Take Joseph's coffin for 3 days.
We'll see. No, we'll see. Yeah, they need the coffin. So Hashem goes. And he tells them, he says, listen, he says, I want you to do, and if you see it over here, you're going to make a circle, and you go back to the direction where you came from. You're going to make this sort of make-believe, like, Paro will think that you guys are lost. You don't know where you're going. So he says, and he says, but don't worry. Moshe goes and tells the Jews, as they're going back towards if you see it, it's going back towards where they came from. Sort of the point of this was to lure Paro out of Egypt. Because Paro had to get out of Egypt and to be destroyed in the sea. So and they traveled from here and they went all the way to the third stopping place, which was Piachirot, which was near Baal Tzafon, which we're going to explain. So in this location, it was called Piachirot because it was like the opening of the free. Because once if a slave was able to get this far from Egypt, then you're a free man. Like after that, you're a free man. But in this place was a very, very interesting natural looking stone shape. It was two stones, huge stones. They looked like it had two pillars that they looked like, and it had an opening of a mouth, and it looked like it had a face of one was shaped like a man, the other one was shaped like a woman. They had two round eyes, and the miraculous thing is that this was all natural. It wasn't humans that came around to do that. It was a natural thing, and this was the temple of Baal Tzafon. This is the only idol, that God didn't destroy when he destroyed all the idols over there. Sort of to think to Paro that, they were able to get so far, but my idol, Baal Tzafon, he got them. So under this idol, Yosef actually hid tremendous treasures because he was so wealthy. He made Egypt so wealthy because he got all this money from all around the world that they came in the famine, that he took all this wealth and he put it inside this, in the underground over here in this temple. So all the Jews came and they packed out all the wealth as well from this temple. Yeah, third stop. So while in this place of Piachirot, there was next to it. There's also stood a strong fortified tower of Egyptian military. They knew that this is where the slaves try to escape, so they put them over. They put them over there. So meanwhile, they're stuck over here. The Jews come to this area, and this area, they're boxed out on all sides. On one side, it's a very dangerous area with dangerous animals, dangerous beasts. On the other side, they have the ocean. On the other side, they have this idol. So and the other side, they have the military, towers. So they were sort of boxed in over here, and the Jewish people were put in like bait to lure out the fish into the sea. So when Paro heard about this, he heard that the Jews stopped in this area. He's like, I knew it. He's like, my idol got it so strong, and they cannot pass him. So this is at the 5th day after the Exodus already, that the Jewish people are standing over there and they're camping over there. And at this point in time, the soldiers come back to Paro and they tell him the Jews are not coming back over here. They're trying to escape. And he realizes that they're trying to escape, but now they're stuck by this area. So meanwhile, some of the members of the Erev Rav, these Egyptian converts, they decided, they didn't like the way that this is going. Paro is going to come. We're boxed in. It doesn't look good. They decide, you know what? We're going back to Egypt, and they go and they start no, and they decided they're going to go back to Egypt. So they go. And these people, they go and they approach Moshe and they say, listen, we got to return to Egypt. We got to keep our word to Paro. So Moshe says, no, you don't have to worry. We're never going back to Egypt. So they wanted to go, and it was some sort of a feud going on. And many of these Erev Rav died because they started fighting and they wanted to go out. But some of them survived and they ran away. Not all of them. This was a part of them. And they ran away. They returned to Egypt. Now these people also came to Egypt, and these people also came over to Paro and told them these Jews are not coming back. And he says, we were there with them, and they started apologizing. We shouldn't have left. Yada yada, the whole thing. Meanwhile, Dasan and Aviran are still in Egypt. And Paro turns over to them and he says, what do you think? He says, I think we should go and recover our lost property. He says, so finally Paro made a decision. He says, he makes a decision, we're going to go and chase after the Jews. They're waiting for us. We're going to go, we're going to get them back. We're going to get back all our property. We're going to get back all our slaves. We're going to come back to where we were before. So, but the problem is that there were still painful memories, very vivid memories of the plagues. So the Egyptians, used to listen to Paro blindly. At this point in time, they're like, listen, should we really go? Should we really go and chase them? So they all started, the advisors, he all came up to the advisors and they all gave in their opinions. So one advisor says, the departure of the Jews is a very, very great loss, a big loss to the Egyptians. Not only did they take our treasures and they take our livestock, but we're losing the valuable slave labor that we have. And another advisor says, not only that, he says, we're losing millions of our good Egyptians. Our own Egyptians went with them, and they converted. And a fourth one said, listen, he says, welcome all our Torah Anytime viewers and listeners and subscribers. And we would have, managed these Jews well. We just mismanaged them. He says, we got to get them back, manage them well. We're going to get back wealthy again, to this time. He says, furthermore, he says, since the Jewish viceroy Yosef was here, he says that we control the entire world. And now that the Jews are going to leave, he says, until this point in time, these nations still gave them a tribute to the Egyptian. What do you think the nations are going to say now that we can't control our own slaves? That they're not going to give us tribute anymore. We're going to lose much more than we just lost today. We're going to lose our reputation. We're going to lose our money in the future. We're going to lose everything. He says we will lose our empire. And now, when Paro takes this all into consideration, and he says, you know what? He says, it was my fault. I should have consulted with my idol Baal Tzifon before I let them out. But he says this idol was so kind to me that he trapped the Jewish people. He's waiting for me to go and get them back. So he decided, and Paro says, I made up my mind. We are going to go and pursue the Jews, and we're going to get them back. But now he had the problem that he had to go and convince all the Egyptian men to go and travel and basically put themselves back into the Jewish hands, where they all just want to get rid of the Jews. So he makes an announcement. He says, anybody who participates in this campaign to go and get the Jews back will get very, very heavily rewarded. You'll be rich to the end of your days. And he says even more than that. He says, I'm so confident in this that usually a king travels in the army in the back. He says, not this time. He says, this time I'm traveling in the front. I'm running the front line to show you that we're going to go there. And even furthermore, he says, we're bringing all our wealth. In the olden days, they used to bring all their wealth with them in their fights to give confidence that we're not losing. We're not losing. So confident that we're not losing that we'll bring in all our money over there to show you that we're going back with our money. So they take all the valuables. Now, these valuables, by the way, were much more valuable than everything the Jews took, because Paro emptied out his treasure house. And Paro, until before they had common people treasure. Now Paro emptied his treasure house, everybody had gold and silver, a tremendous amount of value that was traveling out of Egypt. So Paro gets so into it that he doesn't even wait. He doesn't even ask anybody to put and saddle his horse. He does it himself. He saddles his own horses, and the Egyptians, they start coming in hordes, and they take every single horse that was in there. They took all the horses. They booked them up. So Paro he had 600 deluxe war chariots, and these war chariots you had accompanied by 300 heavily armed soldiers. This is not including other artillery. What's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the weapons that they used and the soldiers that they used. They usually these heavily guard. They would take two strong horses that they would carry these chariots. But not now. Paro wanted speed, so he gave each chariot an extra horse. Each one had three horses. Now Paro didn't realize that he still didn't know that 4/5 of the Jews died. So he's calculating how many Jews there are as 4/5. So he says, listen, he says we need at least we're talking about 3 million military Jewish men of age. He says we gotta supersede that. So he is bringing in a crazy amount of people because the Jews are just 600,000. But he's thinking that there's still 3 million, in additional to all the Egyptians that he has over there. So he's calculating all that, and he's bringing that many supplies.
Plus the Egyptians that converted.
Yeah. So he goes on, and they all start packing out. The Egyptians were split into 3 categories, 3 different groups. One group was they didn't care about killing the Jews. They just wanted to take back their money. The second group had no interest in the money. They only wanted to kill the Jews. The third group both wanted to kill the Jews and take their money. And we're soon going to see when the way that they died in the sea is each going to correlate how they died, but depending on their level of wickedness.
Wait, so Egyptian women stayed at home.
Yes, and children. So it was the 6th day since they left Egypt. In the 6th day, they are the Paro goes and they leave out to travel to get to the Jews to try to bring them back. Meanwhile, the Jews are celebrating the freedom; they're enjoying themselves, and they moved a little bit away from this Piachirot. Now, but at the same point in time, they were still boxed in. So Paro goes and and he starts traveling. Meanwhile, the angel, we're going to go a little bit Kabbalistic over here. We're going to go a little bit in the heavens. Now the archangel of Egypt, his name was Uzzah. Now he went. His interest was in Egypt, so he goes over to heaven and he says, "Listen, Your Majesty, the Jews were supposed to be exiled for 400 years. They were only exiled for 210 years. He says, let my nation go and bring the Jews back for the remainder of the time." So God answers back and says, no. He says, "I never said they have to be slaves for 400 years. We spoke about this in the first class. He said they have to be in a strange land that's not theirs for 400 years. And that was fulfilled already." So the Paro now was, being that he, stuck it so strong against, he failed to honor God, they're going to fall, and they're going to fall strong. Meanwhile, the Jews hear that the Egyptians are coming after them, and they start seeing this massive Egyptian army. You're talking about some serious army that was traveling towards the numbers were so big that if they would have just picked up and thrown dirt on them, they would have buried the Jews. That's how many Egyptians there were. So the Jews they're starting to, and even more so is what they started getting scared is that they saw the Egyptian army coming, but they saw the Egyptian angel hovering above the Egyptian army. Uzzah, he was hovering over them, and he was coming. So they got really scared, and they started getting really nervous. And meanwhile, throughout the entire Jewish camp, there was a feeling of repentance, of tshuva, that was coming to them. Because now, beforehand, when they were suffering, they always pray to God. You always pray when you're in a bad spot. But now they aren't praying. God says, "I missed some prayers over here." So all of a sudden, God gave them a reason to pray, and they started praying, and they started doing tshuva. So meanwhile, while the Jews are doing tshuva, God is offering sacrifices to his Baal Tzifon, to his idol, thanking him that he was, did what he did. So meanwhile, there was a great turmoil. Paro was offering. Did I not say that?
You said God.
No, God. I gotta take that out. Sorry. So Paro was offering his God, which is a fake God, which is an idol. Thank you very much for doing that, for telling me. That he was offering to Baal Tzifon and thanking him for capturing the Jews. Now, amongst the Jews, there was tremendous turmoil. There was one group that they decided they want to surrender. They want to surrender. It says, listen, the Jews, we're dead. We're dead beat. Let's just surrender. We'll go back to Egypt without any resistance. A second group said, no. It says, we'll battle them. It says, we're not going back to Egypt. We'll battle them. A third group says, whatever, what we could do is just make a noisy diversion. They're so scared of us. If we make them scared, they'll just run away. A fourth group, what they want to do is says, listen, we'll just go into the ocean. I'm not going back to, I'm not going to get locked up back in there again. So while this was going on, there was some wicked people amongst the Jews still that they started complaining. And they said, listen, Moshe, says, why'd you take us out over here? He says, you took us out. There was not enough burial graves in Egypt that we have to go and bury it over here. He says, why did you make us take the money? He says, that's why they're coming here. Had we left the money over there, they would have left us alone. So Moshe goes to them and he says, you don't have to worry. You don't have to make any noisy diversion. The only noisy thing that you have to do is your prayer. He says you don't have to be concerned with the battle. God is going to take care of everything. And he says one thing is for sure: complaints is definitely not going to benefit you. So, after Moshe said that, the Jewish people turned around and they saw they saw the ministering angels that were protecting them. The Jewish people who were coming to them. They sort of felt relief. They saw what they had. They saw what the other people had. They sort of were relaxed a little bit. Okay, so meanwhile, Moshe started praying. And God tells Moshe, says, there's no need to pray now. He says, you got to lead people into the sea. And he goes, and Moshe lifts up his staff towards the sky, and this huge wind comes from the east, and it starts, making some movements going on. Moshe then put down his staff, and he was going to stretch out his hand over the waters. But the problem is that, we're going to go zoom back up into the upper worlds. There was the Satan, came in with he says, why should the sea split for the Jews? Because they worship idols. In fact, there's somebody amongst them, Micha, he still has an idol hidden among them. He says, why should we split, the ocean says, for this nation also served idols. The Egyptians served idols, they served idols, why should we split? So they go through. There's a whole judgment, and even the angel of Egypt, Uzzah, also was in there, and because the angel of all these Egyptians were condemned to death. They were decreed that they were going to die. So Uzzah now the angel of Egypt was trying to go and try to get them. Says, why do they have to die? He says, maybe we could work something out. So
Uzzah was protecting Jews?
No, Egyptians. So they go through the entire history of what the Egyptians did to it. They reviewed the case, and it says, look what they did. Not only that, after everything, Pharaoh kept on denying God, and at the end, the one thing that broke everything was there was having this thing, and one angel goes over to another angel, and he says, go down and bring me a brick from the Egyptian building the Jews built. And they go and they grab a brick, and in this brick was a baby, and they put it up over there. And when they put it up on there and they presented this case, and it says, you know what? That's it. They're done. The case is sealed. They're dying in the sea. The Egyptians are going to die in the sea. So
Because of that woman's baby.
not that woman. They did a lot of babies. They put in the walls, but because of that. What?
Didn't a lot of them survive?
No, one of them, Micha. Micha survived. There was yeah.
How survived?
Oh, you mean the Egyptian side? I thought you were talking about that. Yeah. We'll see. We'll soon see.
Micha, a Hebrew name.
He's a Jew.
It's a Jewish name.
Jew.
Why do people name their kids Micha nowadays then?
It's a Jewish name. Micha was a Jew.
Why did he have a knife?
Oh, because if it was people name why do people name their kids Nimrod? I don't know if they still do it anymore. It's bad. So.
Sorry, why did Micha have an idol?
Well, we'll have to go to that afterwards. We spoke about that earlier. Oh, actually, no, we didn't speak about that. But we'll speak about that afterwards. He was a wicked person. Yeah. So okay. So let's go on. So there was this was the same wind. No, you could ask by all means. But let's hold it later because how late are we? How much more are we going to have? We have a little bit more. Not that much more, but a little bit more. So okay. So now this is the same wind. This is a supernatural wind. The same wind that came before the great flood, before it came the Dor Flaga, before Sodom. There was before this also the wind that brought in the plague of locusts. So Paro, one of the reasons that this big wind came is Paro is going to be tricked into thinking that this is all natural. It has nothing to do with God. It's just some natural occurrence that happened in nature. So meanwhile, the Egyptians are coming from one end, and the clouds, rearrange themselves. Now they were protecting between the Jews and the Egyptians. And when the Egyptians came into that, they actually had to start going into the clouds. And this is where the clouds put them into complete darkness. Like the ninth plague of darkness, this is where they went into complete darkness. This is the last day of darkness that they had. Now while this was going on, the Egyptians were going through like this turmoil inside the darkness of the cloud. The Jews were have to go and have to start walking into the ocean. But the problem is that they kept on arguing who should go first. So everyone says I should be the first one, and everyone says I know I should be the first one, and each one was giving a reason why they should be the first one. Finally, Binyamin says, listen, he says, we're known as the Bnei Israel. I am my tribe. Binyamin was only tribe that was named after Yaakov. Changed his name from Yaakov to Israel. Was Binyamin. He says, I'm the only one who's Bnei Israel. I should be the first one. And they start marching their way down into the ocean. But meanwhile, the other tribes were like, no, it's not you. And they started throwing stones at this tribe, but not out of hatred, but out of like that he deserves it. He says, what makes you think that you're going to get it? They weren't doing it in a certain of a way that they weren't fighting in a way that was like who's going to be better, who's going to do it. It was all for who is going to glorify God the most. It was like something in the Shem Shemaim 100%. Everything was for God. So they felt that they were going when they weren't supposed to, and they deserved to be pelted with stones. Meanwhile, there was a person by the name of Nachshon. Nachshon, he went and he from the tribe of Yehuda. He says no. He says it's got to be the tribe of Yehuda, and he runs around and he jumps into the water. Now, because of all this devotion that the tribe of Binyamin and the tribe of Nachshon had, they each got rewarded for what they did. Binyamin, he had the first king, Shaul. He was also the Bet HaMikdash was on his territory. You have Nachshon, was from the tribe of Yehuda. He was the direct descendant that comes out from him was David HaMelech. It was time for them to split the sea. Now, the sea says, why should we split? And so Moshe started saying you got to split. You were since from the time of creation. You were supposed to split until that it was told you that you were going to split in the time of creation on the time the Jews are going to go out of Egypt. And so the sea goes over to Moshe and says, "Why should I listen to you? I came before. I'm older than you. I came before the Adam was born, and as I don't need to listen to you." So it says, "If you're not going to split with me, split at least for the coffin of Yosef. Yosef is over here." And what happened is that the final reason why, and the sea went on back and forth for the milah and all these different things, but what really broke the back was Moshe goes and he placed, he spread out his hand, and Hashem, so to speak, puts his right hand on Moshe's hand, so to speak, again metaphorically, and the ocean sees this and it splits for that reason. It also split for the reason there's a midrashim that speaks about it. It split specifically for the coffin of Yosef, because what happened is that Yosef, when he was, the sea basically says, "Why should I split?" He says, "I'm natural. Natural is meant to do that." When he saw the coffin of Yosef was a person that went against his nature. If he went against his nature and he saw that, he says, "Ayam Rav Yanos." What did he see? He saw the sea saw and he split. What did he see? He saw the coffin of Yosef. Because if Yosef went against his natural tendencies, then I too have to go against my natural tendencies, and I have to split. So now the waters started splitting, but it wasn't just like a quick split. You're talking about rumbling. There was like tremendous noise that was heard out throughout the entire world on how as the two huge walls came towering above them. You're talking about miles and miles and miles high. These walls, the split, of the ocean was not only in the ocean. All the waters in the world split at that point in time. You were eating soup, it split. You were in the bathtub, it would also split. All the waters split. Now, as the Jews, this is where as the Jews started walking into the ocean, the last tribe was the tribe, the Shevet of Dan, and the last person to walk in was Micha, was this guy with the idol. Also, he was the last person to walk in. But at this point in time, Moshe, like an amazing leader, he stood at the outside. And he made sure until all the Jews went in. Meanwhile, the Egyptians are still in this cloud and they're making their way through. And he stood out over there. And as soon as the last Jew went into the seabed, he goes and he walks in as well. Now, the waters, when they first split, so they split that it first split. So the ocean goes down a little bit, and it goes deeper and deeper as you go in. So the first part it split, you saw the floor bed, the sea floor bed, which was very short, and it was a little bit muddy, and people actually started complaining, be like, "Oh, well, what happened over here? Muddy." The Jews, this is where we're complaining, and God says, I'm not going to destroy you only because I need to show the glory to the entire world. So. So they start splitting, but then Hashem hears this complaint. He sends this wind. It solidifies the ground. Then, as they're sort of leveling down, the bed of the water, it didn't split all the way until the bottom. There's an opinion that it split all the way to the bottom. The common opinion is that 2/3 of the water froze and 1/3 of the water split up. So it made their path go straight. They didn't have to go in, out, down. So it was basically a sheet of ice. But one of the miracles is that it wasn't slippery. It was a solid ice that the Jews were able to just walk very gently right across through the ocean. Just picture this. If you picture this, it's a crazy scene. If you're able to have a little bit of imagination, you're talking about towering miles and miles up of huge walls of solid water, and then you have ice going all the way down. And by the way, it wasn't one. The miracle was 12. 12 paths came out. And the way that it was like a semicircle. The Jews came in and they came out the same. They didn't cross the sea like this. They just sort of lured the Egyptians in here.
That was the sea. I thought the one in the middle.
No, this was a sea. This is just how they did it. This is just showing. They just a semicircle. So U-turn. They sort of. It was a sea. But they didn't come exactly where.
Why it was like that.
We'll get to that, B'ezrat Hashem. We'll get to that. So meanwhile, they were walking down, and I remember reading it up. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to say this number because I didn't want to exaggerate. You know how high these walls were? 900 miles high.
That's cool.
Higher than the tallest mountain in the world. Greater than it's on the land. I don't know if it's in the world, but 900 miles high. Crazy high. So all the world marveled at this. This was ridiculous. It was like straight walls, and it was motionless. Meanwhile, you had the angel Gabriel. He was on top of the wall over there, keeping a protective eye on the Jews. He also kept a eye on the water in case the sea decides to do something a little fishy because of that idol carrying guy, Micha. So Meanwhile, the Jews were protected on all four sides now. They were, and one of the reasons were on the right side they were protected because they got the Torah from the right hand of Hashem, and also because they have the mezuzah is on the right side. On the left side, they have the mitzvah of tefillin, and that's put on the left side. In the front, they were protected from Brit Milah. On the rear is they have a kesher. There's a knot of the tefillin that goes on the rear, and also on the rear is because they put tzitzit on their back. So because of that, they were enveloped in all areas. One of the reasons why the men take the tzitzit and they wrap themselves in it on all areas because for what happened in the sea. So now. There was 10 miracles that we're going to go through. There was actually 50, but we don't have time to go through all the 50. We're going to go through the 10 miracles that happened in the sea. Number one is the sea split, but it didn't split all at once. That you see the whole thing. As the Jews walked, it split, which was even makes it so it's like I have a crazy imagination. I'm like picturing it like things are like just building up as they go. Really, just a miraculous, unbelievable sight. Second. The floor of the sea, which was ice, was not wet, was not slippery, was a smooth road. No obstacles, no obstructions. Third, the two walls of the water, they weren't just straight up. They formed an arch. They actually covered them from the top also. And it was sort of like they went through this huge tunnel. And this, you think about it, it's all ice, it's cold, it's probably going to be cold. It was nice, warm, it was protected, and this is the one that ran, like a semicircle. The fourth thing is what we spoke about before, is that it split into 12 different paths. The fifth one is that the walls weren't just walls, they actually formed decorative patterns. It was actually nice to look at. It was mosaic arts of beauty that you were able to look at these things. The sixth, usually the frozen walls, they were salt water. But if you just stuck your finger inside, you had a water fountain, a fresh, clear drinking water that you were able to go out of there. And additionally, you had trees that sort of sprouted. Apple trees, fruit trees, that if you're hungry, you would be able to go and eat it. You had honey, oil, apples, pomegranates, whenever they felt hungry. And, the animals would be able to graze over there. Also, there was grass there. Crazy miracles that was going on over here. This is ridiculous. What I would recommend, being that we're going fast, if I had more time on this, I would paint such a picture over here, because you would see my crazy side of my imagination. It's ridiculous if you just let your imagination run a little bit and see, and actually appreciate the wonders and the miracles that God did for us when Yetziat Mitzrayim. Seventh miracle was with the water. Whenever you wanted to drink, that's when you're able to drink. The eighth one was that the walls were transparent. You're able to see your name, because every tribe went in, but you're able to see the other tribes also. So you won't be nervous like what's happening to the other side, maybe the other tribes. You're able to see them, you're able to talk to them, you're able to converse with them. The ninth one was as soon as the Jewish people left where they're walking, their ground that they're working on turned into boiling mud as soon as the Egyptian arrived. So they were stuck in this. And the 10th one was as soon as the Egyptians came, the ice wall disintegrated and it came crashing upon the Egyptian. So meanwhile, while the Jewish people are walking through the tunnels of the sea, Paro and the Egyptians are trying to mount an attack from the back, from the rear. So they're shooting out these arrows and all these weapons and the spears at the Jews. But we said before that the cloud is blocking them. So the cloud sort of intercepts these things. You have in Israel, you have what's the interception missile called? So if you have a missile that flows in from Gaza, they shoot it up and they bring in the Iron Dome. So that's really cool, but this is a little bit cooler. It says not only did God intercept the missiles, but he U-turned them and put them right back to where they came from. Imagine that. Imagine we create a thing like that. As soon as they come, there's another, different Iron Dome that intercepts it and it goes right back where you came from. So whenever they shot an arrow, it just came shooting back right at them. So they saw this wasn't working, the Egyptians, so they started to let out this tremendous trumpets and roar. There are millions of people over here. So they're all blowing their trumpets, because one of the things that scares is something called a war cry, right? When you're going out to war, you scare the opposing nation that you're fighting against, and they lose their thing, and they start falling in battle. But what the cloud did was it sort of muffled this entire sound. The Jews didn't hear anything. It was peaceful. It was nice. They were just walking and relaxed. So, as many as plagues as the Egyptian had in the sea, there was many more plagues for the Egyptians in the ocean. We're not going to go into it, but I can have a list of 50 plagues that the Egyptians went through specifically in the ocean. Yeah. So they went and they started. And by the way, it says that the plagues in the sea was greater than the pain that they had in the 10 plagues. So during this time, this was night when they were crossing until this point in time, and the night was coming to an end, and it was coming the early morning hours, but it was still dark, and the Egyptians are still going after them, so they can't see where they're going. But they sense something is different because they're walking in there, and it's they're walking into the sea after them in the tunnels, and they sense a little bit like there's something. Oh, is like, are we in the ocean? Where are we? They couldn't figure out where they were.
They didn't see the waters of the ocean?
It was dark. It was completely dark. They sensed something. They saw tunnels. They saw some crazy thing that was going on. So they weren't sure what was going on. But if they would have realized what they were going through, they would have been an idiot and a fool to actually. So it actually entered their mind that it's probably an ocean. But they was like, nah, there's no chance. How are they going to the ocean? So they kept on. The Egyptians kept on traveling after that. As the Egyptian goes in, the heat of the pillar of fire starts melting the walls, and it starts coming crashing down on the Egyptians. And they start coming crashing down on them. And so meanwhile, they're stuck. We said before the ground turned into mud. They turn into mud. Meanwhile, they're having these blocks of ice and water crashing down from hundreds of miles up into on top of them. So the horses, automatically would want to run out. But God made a miracle that He put this image of a mare, of a female horse in the distance. So horses, meanwhile, the Egyptians wanted to back out because now they're starting to see what's going on. And they're getting so confused. There's things crashing down on all sides of them. And the horses keep on going in further and further into the sea. So the Egyptians were going against their will into the ground. Now, while this thing is coming crashing, this ice on top of them, the pillar of fire starts boiling the frozen ground below them, and now it's not just regular mud. Now it's boiling mud and fire, and so they got cold on one side and heat on the other side again. And they start, and this is the comical part over here. There was angels that came, and they came around to all the Egyptian chariots and just removed one wheel from their chariots, a single wheel. So you had this unbalanced chariot going through this fiery mud with thing falling past them. They're trying to go over here. They're stuck over here, and they're bouncing from backwards and forwards. Now, besides they tried to just book it and they tried to get the horses to go, but they couldn't. Even on foot, they couldn't go anywhere because there was so much traffic. Everybody was just falling around all over the place. They couldn't move anywhere. So what they started doing is the Egyptians themselves removed the wheels and tried to make a mudslide. But that didn't work either because there was people everywhere. They couldn't go anywhere. So they were stuck in this like crazy, boiling, muddy, frozen, terrain that they were just getting pelted and bounced back and forth wherever they were. So Jews were the Jews were still in the ocean at this point in time. But their part was nice. The Egyptian part came crashing down. During this time, guess who shows up again? Nope, the locust. Oh. The locust that we put aside, they came back.
Was Bilam there also or no?
Yeah.
We'll
get to that.
You go, I'm going to stay here.
No, he booked, he left, he ran away. So now the locusts come. And besides the locusts, you have this splitting of the ocean didn't just, we said before, thunder and lightning, crazy sounds, crazy sounds. And there was a miracle that hot coals started falling everywhere. The Egyptians had a distinctively, very nice bonus of 5 plagues over here. That number 1 is they had a numbness to the heart. Number 2, they were totally confused. Number 3, their eyes receded into their sockets. Number 4, whatever it is, their skin became consumed, and the tongues dissolved in their mouths. So they had this smelling of rotting flesh that was going on with them, and everything was going on like crazy. And the Jews were enjoying, they were walking, they were enjoying the nice smells of the fruits and the vegetables and everything that was there. So, and meanwhile, the horses, even though as much as they wanted to go back, they couldn't go back. So meanwhile, the Egyptians were starting to scream at each other. They'll be like, "Fall back! Everybody, fall back! Just get it back!" But still, there were still people that says, "No. We're not giving up yet." There were still Egyptians that says, "No, we're not. We're going to give up to the Jewish God. Let us go. We'll continue fighting them." And they were back and forth. Were arguing. Meanwhile, the sea started the sea current. Not only now when it's starting falling down, it started spilling into Egypt as well. And so much so into Egypt itself. So it wasn't only the Egyptians that were in the ocean that drowned. It was also the water started going into the Egyptian land. And there was a miracle that the entire Egyptian land sort of like tilted up, that they were all able to see what was going on. It was daybreak now, and they all witnessed this entire thing. And as they witnessed this, the water is coming up into them. So the Egyptians, they started to, remember we said before, they thought they're so smart. We're going to get the Jews because we're going to throw them in the ocean because God will never destroy a flood again. What they didn't realize is they didn't read the lines carefully. They basically read what they want to read and heard what they want to read. But, God says He's never going to destroy the entire world with a flood. Never said anything about a nation. So, at this point in time, it's early Wednesday morning. It's the 7th day out of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, the 7th day of Pesach, and Moshe starts stretching out his hand, and all the water starts crashing back down again. Now, these waters were Very fun for the Jews, because listen to what happened in the how the Egyptians went. So as it came crashing down, there was a big wind that came back again. So to make people think that it was still a natural occurrence, and so they had this giant waves that kept on crashing down. That they had Egyptians over there. They had magicians. Egyptian magicians. They rhyme. The Egyptians magicians. They what they started doing is so that everything was falling down. So what they did is that they did some sort of magic that they made themselves able to fly. So they were hovering above the water. Meanwhile, like this, a giant wave came. Picture like a hand. They're trying to fly out. They're like, and it sucked them right back into the water. So as soon as they were two master magicians by the name of Yochni and Mamre, who they made themselves these magical wings, and they started soaring straight up to the sky. So Hashem sent an angel Michael to intercept them. He grabs them by their hair and he throws them back into the ocean, and they came plunging back into the ocean. What?
They were involved.
No, that's only in the movies, I guess. What, the Egyptians are supposed to be bold? I don't know. So the waters, what they were doing now to the Egyptians, they started playing around with the Egyptians. They started tossing them back and forth. The water from on top threw the Egyptians all the way to the bottom of the sea. The bottom of the sea said, we don't want them. They threw them back up. So the Egyptians were going, imagine through the pressure. Also, they're going up and down and they're still alive. They're going up and down through the water like whirlpools. And then the water starts throwing them into the air. And they start throwing into the air, and then they start coming crashing right back down again. And because of the height that they came crashing down, they came sinking all the way back in. So they're flying in all over the place. And then one of the miracles is that the horses was always attached to them at the same time. They just stuck together. We can't go into the reason, but why they were both judged separately. Should the horses be saved? Should the Egyptians be saved? And the whole thing. They both were going to go, and they got judged that they both need to die and sink into the ocean. That's the long part, which maybe I'll explain afterwards. So if we have time. So meanwhile, the bottom of the sea was not, again, just a simple bottom of the sea. It was actually roaring with fires. It was fires at the bottom of the sea. And the shattered bodies, their broken bones are falling everywhere, was where they were resting all of a sudden, these Egyptians down to the bottom of the sea. Now, there was 3 types of Egyptians we spoke about earlier, and those 3 died a different way. The ones that were not as wicked, they died the quickest. They just sunk in like lead, and they drowned instantly, and they had an instant death. The middle level Egyptians, they sank like stones. So their drowning was fairly quickly, but they weren't moving around so much. The most wicked Egyptians, they were like straw. They were very slowly moving back and forth, and it was a very slow and painful death. Everybody gets judged according to, even if you have a whole mass thing, everybody gets according to their, midah keneged midah, per the person as well. It's crazy how meticulous God is. It's awesome. It's so awesome. So meanwhile, the Jewish people are now safely crossing to the other side, and they're hearing the Egyptians screaming back and forth with all the torments that they're going through. Besides the fact that they have all the locusts that are coming, and the darkness, and the fire, and the cold, and all the pain that they were going through, that the screaming started to calm down, and they stopped. And now the Jews are outside, but now they're nervous. They're like, they don't see any Egyptians anymore, but said, who knows? Maybe they're on the other side, because they came in the semicircle. Maybe they're down over there. We don't know if we really escaped them.
They knew they were going in a semicircle?
No, they just followed the path, and the path took them right back out. So what happened is that Moshe started crying out to Hashem. He says, they don't believe you. They don't believe that. Show them. So there was a big wind again that came, and the bodies of the Egyptians spit out. They came flying out of the ocean. They came flying out of the ocean, and they landed on the ground. Now the ground was like, we don't want them, and the ground threw them back to the ocean. So even though some of them were even still alive at this point, they were at the last breath, and they were flinging back and forth from land to ocean, land to ocean. Meanwhile, there was an argument going up, what should we do with these Egyptians? The land says, we don't want these wicked people, and the ocean says, we don't want these wicked people. So at the end, the maskana, they paskin in Shemayim, that says that the land has to get it, because they came from land, they're going to return to land, and that's where they're going to have to go. So finally, they get thrown into the land, and all the Jews are walking over there. Now, some of these Egyptians are still alive, so they're walking and be like, "Oh, man, this is my taskmaster. Oh, this is the guy who bit me all the time. Oh, weren't you in the?" And as they were dying, the Egyptians also suffered a tremendous humiliation, where they see their slaves towering over them as they take their last breath. So this is also one of the reasons why this is so imperative, is now the Jews, they felt that they were really free. When you know that the Egyptians, your masters are dead, you're never looking over your shoulder. If you're never looking over your shoulder, so then you feel free. You feel it's a real freedom. So now that the Jews saw the dead bodies of the Egyptians, they really felt that they were free. So besides the ocean throwing up all the Egyptians. We said before that the Egyptians came in with lots of money, lots of wealth. The ocean came and spit out all the wealth also. So the wealth over here that the Jews collected, they started collecting all the wealth, was greater than all the wealth that they had created until now. So you're talking about now unbelievable amount of wealth that they have over here. So now what happened to Paro? So everybody, it says everybody died over there. So there's conflicting opinions on what happened to Paro. There's one opinion that says that Paro died right in the beginning. There's another opinion that says that no, Paro died all the way at the end, let him suffer the most. And there's another opinion that he actually got saved. He actually got saved, and so that he was one who says that there's no such thing as God, I don't believe it. He is going to go screaming out to everybody else that there is such a God. There is, we don't have the time to go into it, but there's an opinion that says that he was later the king of Nineveh, where Yonah came and he started saying, you guys are sinning, you got to do it. And Paul says, I know this God. He says, no, we're fasting, we're doing repentance. I went through that before, I'm not going through that again. There's some say there was a reincarnation because it was many years later, but yeah. So
wait, do you think Paro would have changed his name?
could be he did. Power was just a title given to him. It was like a king. Yeah. So So Paro, but there is an opinion that says that there was that Paro, he suffered the most. He was 50 days tied with a chain in the bottom of the sea, and kept alive somehow. But he was suffering with all these crazy amount of sufferings. But one of the things was he was taken to the gates of Gehenna, Paro. And whenever he saw an idol worshiper come in, he would start screaming at them, says, why didn't you learn your lesson from me? 10 plagues, they destroyed my land. You couldn't figure it out. You're still serving idols. Look what I did. And he says, he still didn't listen to it. Okay, but we're almost finished over here. Let's just, so now that the Jews saw all this coming out, and all the nation, that they started feeling so happy, so close to God, that this is where they started to sing Shirah. This is where they started to sing Shirah. We don't have the time to go through the Shirah, which is unbelievable. It's a really nice, beautiful thing. No. So it's a question about how the woman sang it. We won't have the time to go through that when we sing, Pasha Shirah, I think it's Pasha B'Shalach, if I'm not mistaken. So they went and they started singing praise, and it says that the visions and the level that these Jews got of prophecy by the crossing of the sea was greater than even the Navi of Yecheskel. Wow. That's how high they was. They were so, and this also caused them a little bit of an issue we're soon going to see. So Moshe went, he composed, we'll speak a little bit about Tchiat Metim, we'll speak very shortly. Moshe composed this beautiful lyrics of Shirah that we sing as Yashir Moshe. And then first the people, I'm sorry, this is the first time in history that people sang praises to God. Until then, people gave praises to God, but never as a song. This is the first one. And the future time also, in Tchiat Metim, the Shirah will also be sung as well. And it says it's so miraculous that even the babies in the wombs of their mothers also sang Shirah. But now, like, there was voices that were coming out. It was in a spiritual sense because they weren't able to speak.
Now, like between before, why they needed song now?
They just maybe it's the level of euphoria that they had. I don't know if it was distinction or that's what it's the level that they reached. Regarding women, so it says the woman also sang, not in the beginning because of modesty, but then the question is how are they supposed to sing? Not modest with the men, but it says also the woman had the musical instruments. This is, by the way, how confident the women were. This is how much emunah. Women have such faith in God. They have so much strength. It's always known the women have very strong faith in God. Or at least you have the power to have that faith. That they were so confident that now going back to Egypt, they took out like musical instruments. Like you're booking Egypt, and they took out musical instruments. So what they did was that they played these musical instruments so loud that it died out their singing. So you couldn't hear the singing, so it wasn't a problem with that. So they go and they sing, and after they finished the song of praise, they went and they were supposed to now travel to the Midbar, to the desert. They were supposed to continue traveling, but the Jews were like, how can we leave this awesome place? Like, this is the highest place that they ever got, the closest they are to God. He says, we have prophecy over here, levels, we have the crossing of the sea, like, let's stay over here. Let's stay in the shore of Yam Suf. Let's stay right over here. This is awesome over here. Yeah. So he says, no. Moshe says, no, we got to go. We got to go to Har Sinai. We got to go out to Eretz Yisrael. We're not finished over here. So some of them even said, he says, no, why do we got? He says, some of the Jews even says, listen, let's go back to Egypt. Everyone's like, Egypt? Why you go back to Egypt? They're like, think about it. Egypt is done. We walk in there, we take over everything. They're done. We're not going to see Egypt anymore. It's going to be our land. And then Moshe says, don't worry, we have a different land that's belonged to us, and that's Eretz Yisrael and not Egypt. And he says, and they continue going, and if you think about it, that this is one of the things that you can tell the people that don't believe, we would have been able to go in to Egypt and easy take it over. All the men were out at sea, they died. The flood went into the Egyptian land as well, and they took it over. It would have been simple, just walk in. We didn't even have to fight. Just walk in, everybody will kneel down, and just let us do whatever we want to do. But no, we had a land, and the land is Eretz Yisrael. So, any Palestinians who think that, it says, no, it's our land from the beginning. So, and it's not because we didn't have anywhere else to go, and that's why we got the land. Sort of something like that. So, after that, so they were arguing what to do. They didn't know. So they were staying over there. Meanwhile, the clouds of glory says, "Listen, we're moving," and they started leaving them. And the Jews saw that the clouds of glory are leaving them, so they ended up going and following the pillars. And this is where the travels in the deserts begin. And B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully, I don't know, maybe we'll continue a series on what happens there and afterwards. But B'ezrat Hashem, I always wanted to say this, but if somebody wants to do more further reading on this, so strongly recommend to go into Mam Lo'ez. Mam Lo'ez has such a phenomenal thing. You look at Mam Lo'ez, it's in English. They have book number 4 and 5 speaks about this in depth. They also, the Rabbi Yosef Deutsch did an incredible job in a sefer he wrote, Let My Nation Go, in a very, very beautiful story format. Of course, we cannot forget that you have to look into the Chumash, because that's where all this is all based off from. But I hope from this story you got a different understanding. We're coming into Pesach now. You can have a different understanding of what we're actually going through. And one of the things is that you expand on the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, because when you say the story more, you realize how grateful we have to be to God. God was awesome. Look at what He did for us. You hear 10 plagues, okay, frogs, a lot of frogs, annoying, okay, very good. But you don't realize what God did to it. That's why it says, whoever goes and speaks more and more about it. So now I gave you guys about 6 hours of material to speak about. So you can definitely speak by Yeseda. It's definitely good. It's definitely very important. And it's if you have imagination, use it for this. Use it for this. Don't think about your Transformers or whatever it is. The sci-fi things now. Well, not girls, but the guys. But think about. Use your imagination. Think about what God did to us. It's so amazing. It's so fundamental. We have to be so forever grateful in this holiday. This holiday when we became the Jewish nation. And B'ezrat Hashem, may we really internalize the lessons that we learned from this story, from this midrashim, from this unbelievable part in our Jewish history, and may we grow and have B'ezrat Hashem Mashiach B'meher B'Yameinu. May we be able to sing the Shirah of Tchiyat Matim B'meher B'Yameinu. Okay.